Chapter 1304. As the first player in the world to awaken in real life, Lu Xiaoyang should have felt very honored, but he was not happy at all. The awakened ability in the game had combined with the real world. Apart from the characteristics of his ability itself, there were also many personal traits that were unique to the real world, such as his habit of chewing bones. This habit was very strong. It was comparable to the human race's instinct to reproduce, and he could not get rid of it. As the deputy general manager of the Tianguan Group, Lu Xiaoyang, who was second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people at this moment, he felt like 10,000 alpacas were galloping in his heart. I am a noble Cerberus of hell. I am a super mythical beast with 3 heads that can spit out flaming storm, frost ambush, and darkness curtain. Why did I fall in love with chewing bones? How could a noble being like the Cerberus be infected with the bad habits of a rural dog? No, I must hold on. I will not eat bones even if you beat me to death. I, Lu Xiaoyang, have an annual income of 7 figures, a house in the second ring road of the city, and a car at home. I will be a big shot in the outside world. I will not give up my dignity. Even if I die, I will not give in. Don't you want to try it? Listen to me. I have never eaten anything so delicious in my life. Try it. Try it. Don't you think the soup is very fragrant? Listen to the sound of the bone marrow gurgling. Oh my God, this fragrance is killing me. Really, all my taste buds feel like they're dancing. Yu Hong, Fong Tianyu, and Suli looked at Lu Xiaoyang with grief and sympathy in their eyes. Buttface was holding the big bone rod that was about to break. There was no soup on it, nor any fragrant bone marrow. He had already sucked it dry. This big bone rod should have been licked until it was white, but he did not notice it and even try to share with others. He was terminally ill. In addition, there were more than 30 big bone sticks placed on the side of the dining table. He was afraid that the restaurant stock of this dish today was going to be cleaned up by him. Finally, Buttface put down the bone in his hand, wiped his mouth, and burped loudly. This was the end of his gluttony for the day. Fong Tianyu looked at Lu Xiaoyang sympathetically. I say, have you really awakened? I don't think so. It must be the awakening of some shameful multiple personality in your heart. That's why you like to gnaw on bones. Didn't the boss give you the nickname Dog 3? He must have seen that you were a husky in your previous life. Lu Xiaoyang gritted his teeth. Shut up. Believe it or not, I will bite you to death. Yu Hong coughed lightly to get the 2 of them to behave themselves. Otherwise, they might start fighting in the private room. Xiao Lu, the 4 of us are all S rank in the game. So why did you awaken first? Logically speaking, the 4 of us should be synchronized. Our abilities in the game are comparable to modern firearms. If we really bring these abilities into the real world, I'm afraid it will have a huge impact on the current society. Don't joke around. Lu Xiaoyang saw that the 3 of them did not believe him, so he simply raised his right hand. With a flash of light, his right hand turned into a crimson furry claw in front of everyone. The crimson furry claw was surging with bright red smoke, and hellish magma flowed through the cracks in the rocks above it. The temperature of the whole room suddenly rose by a few degrees, making the air-conditioned room feel like a boiler. Yu Hong and the other 2 had to believe him now. After Lu Xiaoyang withdrew his power, Su Li said in confusion, but the 3 of us did not feel anything at all. Dog 3, what were the signs before you awakened? Lu Xiaoyang recalled for a while and said blankly, at that time, I was looking at the business report in the office. I did not do anything else, nor did I have any warning signs. I was a little sleepy, so I yawned. In the process of yawning, I transformed. In the air, I blew out and melted the monitor. Yu Hong asked, so you were in your human form a moment ago, and in the next moment, you turned into a 3-headed dog? Lu Xiaoyang nodded. Exactly. There were no signs at all. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and did not transform completely. Otherwise, when my real body appeared, I'm afraid that the floor of the office would collapse. The ordinary employees in the company would be so scared that they would wet their pants. Then why did you do that? Yu Hong and the other 2 were scratching their heads. Everyone knew that this was a big secret that could even shake the world, but they had no clue about it. After all, not every player was as calm as the 4 of them. Nowadays, the game system would reselect new players every time. It was hard to guarantee that there would not be people with extreme personalities. If such people were allowed to awaken their abilities and could use them in reality, it would only be a matter of time before they were seen by ordinary people, and it would cause chaos in the world. Fong Tianyu suggested, "By the way, let's try to find a non-player to talk about the game and see if he's been reset. Then we will know, right?" The other three rolled their eyes at him. Lu Xiaoyang shrugged. "You are dreaming. Who can communicate with ordinary people? You? Who would want to be reset? That was another life. That was another magnificent world. Think of me, the three-headed dog of hell. Shut up. Look at what that is." Fong Tianyu suddenly lost control and pointed at the corner of the room. Yu Hong and Suli looked at each other. Something was wrong. Lu Xiaoyang looked in the direction of Fong Tianyu's finger. It was a common fire extinguisher, but Fong Tianyu looked at it with fear in his eyes. It was like a mouse seeing a cat, or a mosquito seeing insecticide. Yu Hong said, "Could it be? That's right, I have awakened too." Fong Tianyu's hair suddenly ignited. The flames were extremely fierce. Unlike the three-headed dog of hell, Fong Tianyu's flame of the fire spirit was his strongest ability. When it was fully unleashed, it was extremely ferocious and pierced through the ceiling. At this moment, the door of the room was suddenly opened. The waitress pushed the door open and entered. "Dear guests, sorry to disturb you. Our shop is having an event today. Recharge." The four of them turned their heads to look at the waitress. The flames on Fong Tianyu's head were immediately retracted. The air froze for 5 seconds. The four of them recovered from their shock. The next moment, their faces turned pale. They had just thought of finding a player to test the ordinary people. In the blink of an eye, Fong Tianyu had awakened, and their plan was exposed. 4 S-level players had been reset at the same time. This was a huge blow to the human race. Well, if we say that we are magicians and that we were performing magic just now, would you believe us? As expected of Buttface, he reacted very quickly and started to talk nonsense at the first possible moment. In the void, Chen Guang was also watching this scene. He curled his lips. "Who would believe you? Do you think we are fools?" Unexpectedly, the waitress came forward and looked at Fong Tianyu's hair carefully. Seeing nothing abnormal, she really believed him. How naive. After the waitress left, the four of them heaved a sigh of relief. They had finally gotten away with it. However, this didn't make sense. In the past, players would be reset, even if they just mentioned it to others. Now they were caught red-handed. Even if she really believed in their nonsense, with the harsh nature of the game system, the four of them should have been reset to have their memories tampered on the spot. Now, they had somehow passed the test. In the void, Chen Guang was also observing Earth and carefully sensing the rules of the universe on Earth. After a long time, Chen Guang let out a long sigh. Things could no longer be reversed. The game system would no longer reset the players. This meant that the players were really going to enter Earth. As expected, the awakening of Lu Xiaoyang and Fong Tianyu was like the key to Pandora's box. One day later, almost all the S-level players around the world had awakened one after another. On the other side, Chen Guang could no longer continue to pay attention to Earth. He was pulled into the next realm of the Azure Sky Cup. This time, it was not a magical existence like the world of creation. Instead, he was asked to become the strongest water archmage in a magic plane. It seemed that the heavenly Holy Grail intended to let him come into contact with the power of God from now on. It wanted to complete his knowledge of elemental energy. By the time Chen Guang exhausted all his strength and came out of the heavenly Holy Grail, another 3 days had passed on Earth. In these 3 days, players from S-level to E-level had completed their awakening one after another. Mankind had ushered in a drastic change. Chapter 1305. Just as Yu Hong and the other three were worried about, the first thing that would happen was social security. Not everyone was steady enough. There were good people and bad people in this world. There were good people like Chen Guang, who would take the initiative to take responsibility after obtaining power, but there were also lawless people who would forget everything after obtaining a little ability. After all, the heavenly Holy Grail selection of players was a test of talent, not character. Players who had trained to rank C and above in the game were fine. After all, they knew that it was not easy for them to obtain their abilities. Regardless of whether it was in the game or in real life, they had experienced a lot. They also knew that there was always someone better out there, and they would not be able to escape punishment if they did anything wrong. However, for the lower-ranked E players, especially rank E players, and especially those ordinary people who had just been selected to become players, it was not easy for them to maintain absolute calmness in the face of a sudden superpower. If I don't tell anyone and only use my ability to secretly do something to ordinary people, I won't be found out, right? Players had all kinds of strange abilities, such as invisibility, fire control, elementalization, and even mechanical creation like genius high school students. There were also many awakened psychic abilities. Many players who had just become inexperienced would always try to use their psychic abilities to do something to ordinary people after losing their minds. The riot happened 7 days later. The cause of the incident was a young man who was originally a thief and had become a player. His ability also corresponded to his profession in real life. It was called Designated Snatch. In short, he could designate any human within his field of vision and further designate an item from that person. He could also temporarily store the item in the dimensional pocket that his ability gave him. Therefore, this man squeezed into the subway of Denghai City and wiped out the phones of thousands of people in 7 carriages. As soon as the case broke out, it immediately attracted attention. There were already many awakened players in the National Police Department. In the early days after the incident, everyone was suddenly at a loss as to what to do. Was it better to reorganize the internal structure of the police department and set up an organization that specialized in dealing with awakened ones, or to separate the awakened elite members and set up another system that was independent of the police department? Or could they join forces with the Heaven Division and set up a special department? Although the members of the Heaven Division were strong in combat, they were not professional police officers. In terms of fighting crimes, the members of the Heaven Division might not be as good as experienced police officers. Arresting criminals couldn't just rely on force. There were also many criminal investigation techniques and experience in various criminal psychology. When a capable police officer walked on the street, he would be able to detect any suspicious person walking past him. These things could not be compared to inner strength martial artists who were obsessed with martial arts. Perhaps only the Six Swords sect and the current Xinxing sect had special talents in this aspect. Then, if the Ministry of Heaven and the police system were to join hands to create a new department, who would be in charge? While the two sides were still in the middle of the meeting, the first major case, caused by an awakened, was placed on everyone's table. Thank God, no matter how heavy the loss of property was, it was still bearable. It was better than a murder case. However, this also reminded everyone that they could not delay any longer. They had to come up with a plan as soon as possible. Fortunately, compared to other countries in the world, China's national system was destined to lead the world in the face of such abnormal situations. Within 3 days, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Heaven, Xianqin, took the lead. The head of the Ministry of Heaven, Dai Quan, the leader of the Xinxing sect, as well as the heads of various large families, assisted them. Together with the top players carefully selected from the police system, a new department was set up at lightning speed. They immediately took over the abnormal cases in the country. Within the Ministry of Heaven, several players who had awakened their special abilities were recruited to collect information. They displayed all of their abilities. One of them developed a special ability that was similar to a radar. Within 24 hours, the case was solved and the designated level E player was arrested. After that, since the incident had already happened and could not be covered up, everyone knew that as time passed, more and more players would appear in the public eye. The newly established Dragon Division took the initiative to reveal the secrets of the awakened to the public. They even used the missing Guang as a model. The world finally understood. No wonder the almighty Guang was omnipotent. He was actually the first awakened of mankind and the strongest awakened to date. At the same time, a new storm suddenly arose. The players who had previously possessed the identity of an awakened but died in the game and had their identity reset, gradually regained their memories and identity as players. However, no matter what level these players had reached, after regaining their identity, they could only start all over again from level E. Even so, the total number of players increased from 10 million to nearly 30 million. This meant that on average, there was at least one player for every 200 people. It was just like the experimental class in the high school that Chen Guang studied in. There were less than 50 people in the class, but there were actually 3 awakened. If they could not communicate with the outside world in the past, the secret of the awakened could continue to be hidden. However, at this stage, it was impossible. In a short period of time, the matter regarding the awakened became a trendy topic. Everyone was discussing it. Even the greetings of the Annies on the street had become, "Is there anyone in your family who is an awakened? My distant cousin's wife's classmate, blah, blah, blah." Just like that, everything regarding the awakened appeared in front of everyone at lightning speed. Everyone's view of the world was broadcasted. In the beginning, there were naturally some people who felt uncertain. However, the Dragon Tribe appeared out of nowhere as the Chinese government. First, they ruthlessly suppressed a small group of restless level E awakened. At the same time, they quickly mobilized hundreds of thousands of awakened from the various civil service systems in the country to conduct a nationwide census. After that, everything slowly calmed down. In less than a month, more than 90% of the awakened in China had been registered. Most of them were new level E awakened. A few were lucky enough to advance to level D or level C. Of course, most of the players who could rely on their own abilities to reach level B or even level A in the previous missions had their own opinions. Many of them were unwilling to let their names appear in the register. As for the top level S awakened players, apart from a few who had the ability to hide their information, most of them were found by the intelligence personnel of the Dragon Tribe using their awakened abilities. The Chinese government adopted a rather effective conciliatory policy toward these top players. They mainly tried to rope them in and cooperate with them. They also promised them various benefits and allowed them to become non-staff members of the Dragon Tribe. Most of the level S awakened players did not reject the goodwill of the Dragon Tribe. The reason was simple. There were close to 20 people who were directly related to Qinguang. It was impossible for them to go against the Dragon Tribe. These people made up the majority of the level S awakened players. Although they were not particularly familiar with each other, they knew that they were on the same side. The Dragon Tribe had a relationship with Xianqin and Wu Miaowan. The person in charge of the police force was also Wu Tong. They were all wearing the same pants, using the same cough. When Chen Guang saw that the situation in the country had stabilized, he stopped thinking about the dreams. At present, although he wanted to interfere, the level of his current realm was too high. Unless he took the initiative to create a clone, he would not be able to return to Earth's universe for the time being. With his current situation, if he rashly broke into Earth's universe and put his physical body near the solar system, the entire solar system would be affected by his realm. It was hard to guarantee that there would not be a space tear, but he didn't want to easily create doppelgangers. He was already in an awkward situation in the creation world. If he were to put a doppelganger on Earth, he might accidentally split his soul. It would be terrible if he couldn't escape. At this time, Chen Guang could only complete his task step by step. Every once in a while, he would come out and pay attention to the situation on Earth. When he was extremely bored, he would also pay attention to other civilizations in the universe. He still remembered reading a lot of science fiction novels when he was young. He had also imagined more than once that if one day Earthlings really came into contact with aliens, what would it be like? In addition, for the current civilization on Earth, interstellar travel was obviously impractical. If the technology of an alien was advanced enough to cross the distance in units of light years to come to Earth, then how terrifying would the level of technology of this alien be? In the past, these things could only be imagined in his heart. However, now that he had transcended the Earth's universe, his vision could be placed anywhere in the universe. He finally had the opportunity to appreciate the magnificence of a universe as an outsider. The spiritual life form that had no physical body and was completely composed of energy was the true master of the Milky Way. According to a certain classification in the past, this was a level 3 civilization. However, every individual in this civilization existed in a way that humans could not understand at all. Moreover, the bodies of these individuals were so huge that they were beyond human imagination. Even if their bodies passed through the solar system, humans on Earth would still not be aware of it. However, the truth was that billions of years ago, one of them had indeed passed through the solar system and casually patrolled his territory. Then it brought about the Big Bang of biological evolution on Earth. After a series of coincidences that could not be explained by the theories of the Earth's universe, after an evolution that left the Creator dumbfounded, humans on Earth were born. In addition, in the huge Milky Way, there were still a number of level 2 civilizations that were not considered large. However, they were very far away from Earth. Moreover, with their technological level, it would take at least tens of thousands of years for them to reach Earth, which was located on the cantilever of Orion at the edge of the Milky Way. Of course, one of the level 2 civilizations had already discovered the existence of Earth and knew that a young primary civilization was being nurtured on Earth. They had included Earth into their theoretical territory. Perhaps they would send an emissary one day. The universe was too vast. The resources on Earth were not enough to attract them to pay a huge price to conquer this place. In the eyes of the level 2 civilizations that had already discovered the existence of Earth, the civilization on Earth was probably just an insignificant detail. Of course, whether it was a level 2 or level 3 civilization, or even a higher level civilization that had mastered dark matter energy and could travel across large galaxies, they would never know that there was an existence that could not be understood by the wisdom of the Earth's universe. It was standing outside the entire universe, looking down on everything here. Whether it was the dimensions of the Earth's universe or the newly established headquarters of the Dragon Tribe, time was still moving forward in a strange curve. Chen Guang had only satisfied his curiosity for a while. After that, he turned his attention back to the mission in the World in Cup and the game system. With the awakening of the players on Earth, the game system was revised once again. It seemed that the resurrection of the players who had died in battle was in preparation for this revision. At the same time, the number of Protoss players had also increased explosively. There seemed to be a consciousness that was secretly controlling the balance of power between the human and Protoss players. Well, Chen Guang knew that this was his subconscious. The faction wars that occurred in the game space became even more intense. After experiencing the painful turmoil, the humans on Earth adjusted their social structure at an extremely fast speed. On the other hand, they also used a stronger attitude in the game system to meet new challenges. The reason was simple. In the past, the game and reality were separated from each other. Although the players were reluctant to give up the various awakened abilities obtained in the game system, they did not have much concrete help to their real lives. However, it was different now. The abilities obtained in the game could be reflected in real life. This meant that becoming stronger in the game could also lead a better life in real life. In addition, the game gave people a more and more real feeling. In the past, everyone thought that this might just be a nightmare that they would have from time to time. Now, everyone suddenly realized that this seemed to be a journey of another life. They also existed in the game, and they were fighting in another space. No one would complain about having a long life. Being able to have another life was something that everyone dreamed of. In addition, the memories of the current players would not be reset after they died in battle. They would just lose all their awakened abilities and become a real, ordinary person again. Scientists put more energy into studying the game system and came up with various conclusions. For example, the well-known scholar Tang Ing once said that perhaps the theory of mirror projection was correct. Everything that happened in the game system was actually in a parallel plane where time and space intersected. Every human who was lucky enough to become a player could obtain a body and abilities in another plane while retaining their body on Earth. Originally, the two planes should not interfere with each other, but perhaps because of some intersecting plane of the universe, the abilities in the game suddenly materialized in reality. While Tang Ying was giving her speech, Chen Guang, who had just completed another test in the Cup of Justice, was also watching this unique academic discussion from a distance. Chen Guang wanted to tell her that in a sense, she was right, but in fact, she was wrong again. There is no such thing as a plane where time and space intersects. The truth is thousands of times more complicated than you think. Every time the Holy Grail works, it will create thousands of intersecting planes at the same time. At the same time, it will use energy to completely reconstruct your body and extract your consciousness. When you are fortunate enough to complete the World Within Cup of the Sea, the Spirit Sky game, you will be able to see the One-Line Sky, the Cloud Elephant Sky, and even my World Within Cup of the Blue Sky. Only then will you know what kind of parallel plane this is. The rules and dimensions in this game space are much higher than those of the Earth universe. Just like the True Force realm, if the current S-level players were given a chance to return to the True Force realm, they would probably be able to discover more secrets hidden under the surface of the True Force realm, which was like the ancient appearance of Earth. The closer they got to the truth, the farther away they would find themselves from the truth. Chen Guang took a deep breath and turned his attention to the level 2 civilization on the cantilever of Orion. A bold idea popped up in his mind. Could he also turn this civilization, which was also a carbon-based life form, into a player? But if that was the case, would it create a third camp outside of the humans and the Protoss? Would this break the current balance? After a slight attempt, he gave up because he found that he could not do it. It seemed that only humans from Earth who had the same initial genetic structure as him could be selected as players. Chen Guang began to speculate randomly again. If he was not born on Earth when he was reincarnated, but a member of that level 2 civilization, would it not be the humans from Earth who were involved, but that civilization? Of course, the probability of this happening was very low. It could be judged from the extreme similarity between the Protoss and the humans on Earth. Although the level of the Earth civilization was not high, its genetic structure was still the closest to a perfect form in the endless heavenly realm. This might also be the only form that could break through the shackles of the endless heavenly realm. Chapter 1306. If he could go back, Chen Guang really wanted to tell others how many unique life forms there were in the universe. If he could, he might even become an interstellar wanderer and continuously move the technology of other advanced civilizations to Earth. Then he would let the technology of humans on Earth explode and walk out of Earth, or even the solar system, or even the Milky Way galaxy. That would definitely be a blissful thing. He would also become one of the greatest people in the history of mankind. In the future, no matter how many tens of thousands of years passed, his name would definitely be deeply engraved in the history books, never to be erased. Sometimes, Chen Guang felt very strange. The entire universe was clearly a candy in his pocket, but he still cared about the progress of civilization on an atom in the candy. This feeling was quite different. However, after thinking about it, Chen Guang figured out. This was probably because he chose to be an Earthling when he reincarnated. As long as he had not lost his humanity, he could not help but think from the standpoint of Earthlings. On the other side, after completing the remedial study of fire, water, wind, light, darkness, soul, and other elemental energies besides the earth element, the One-Line Heavenly Cup continued to expand its scope to various fields that he had never imagined. There were fields of metaphysics, such as the strongest divination technique, the strongest geomancy technique, the strongest dragon-seeking technique, and so on. This dragon-seeking technique was similar to geomancy, but it was also different. It generally included the essence of formations in geomancy, and its main scope was the study of tombs. Originally, it was used to build tombs after the death of some almighty beings in the God realm. Almighty beings cultivated for a lifetime, and the energy contained in their bodies was not trivial. It could create the world, and it could be small. Even if only the remains of their bones or divine sense were left, these remnants of matter and energy could destroy the world. The latecomers in the God realm often flocked to it. If anyone was lucky enough to obtain a fragment of the God Emperor's tomb, it would be enough for a mortal god or a divine soldier to become a divine monarch. Don't be fooled by the projection in the game system. If they were in the celestial realm or in the planes created by the celestial race, they would be omnipotent. They could destroy the heavens and the earth. Even after death, their power was enough to condense an indomitable spirit. There was once an ancient person who wrote a strange novel specifically for the dragon-seeking art. It was about the experiences of a god king who was lucky enough to be reborn in a god kingdom. He used tomb digging to force his way into the tomb of all gods and obtain the legacy of all gods. In the end, he cultivated the righteous path and became known as Emperor Huangji. This supernatural novel also had an online novel with the same name on Earth, called The Tomb of the God of Sin. For the first time, Chen Guang's graduation exam for studying the dragon-seeking technique was set outside of the Mission Cup. Instead, he was asked to go to the Earth's universe and affect hundreds of millions of galaxies the size of the Milky Way. Through the addition of formations and divine power, as well as inscribing the psyche power of countless living beings, he was asked to condense a great tomb for nourishing the spirit. He wanted to take the opportunity to go back to Earth, but the assessment mission had drawn a boundary for him, and he could not pass through the invisible barrier in the void. In the vast history of the God realm, there were indeed many people who were above the God Emperor level who had hidden their tombs in the lower planes that they had created. After the death of the God Emperor, the planes that they had created could continue to exist for many years. By hiding their tombs in them, it would be difficult for the lower gods who try to pry into their tombs to find them. It could also be considered as giving them more peace after death. Of course, the real purpose of the gods building their tombs was to give themselves a chance of survival. Maybe one day, they would be able to meet a certain condition in the lower planes that they had created and be reborn. This condition might require a certain expert in the plane that they had created to cultivate to a certain extent so that they could be reborn by the divine will that they had left behind. It might also require a certain civilization in the plane to reach a certain level of scientific and technological level. By breaking a certain level of rules that the gods themselves possessed, they would be able to trigger the rebirth of life. Or, like Chen Guang himself, it might require a certain individual in this universe to be born with a genetic structure that perfectly matched his predecessor. In that case, when this body was born, it was actually equivalent to him being reborn. Even if this was actually a completely independent existence, it would not inherit his memory at all. But from an objective point of view, he was indeed reborn. In short, every god who tried in vain to use rebirth to obtain a longer lifespan would not give up on this attempt. The methods that they had left behind were also very strange and varied, depending on the rules that they had mastered. As time passed, 10 years had passed on Earth in the blink of an eye. After Chen Guang left, the people of Earth used a whole 10 years to accept the new social structure, and the relationship between the awakened and ordinary people gradually stabilized. Although the awakened had great power, no one knew when an ordinary person would suddenly awaken and become a genius awakened. In the game system that completely followed the dark law of the jungle, any ordinary person who seemed inconspicuous in the real world could suddenly rise to power in the game and become a genius awakened that people looked up to. The saying, "Don't bully a poor youth," was interpreted to the extreme in the game system. In addition, although ordinary people had not awakened their abilities, with the big explosion of photocatalyst technology as a primer, the level of human science and technology in all aspects began to wildly expand, and the wisdom and inspiration of ordinary people exploded to the extreme. Whether it was basic material science or astrophysics, the level of science and technology in all aspects rapidly rose to a level that was unimaginable by the predecessors. The higher the level of science and technology brought more social status to ordinary people. Moreover, the top scientific researchers who engaged in scientific research were the crystallization of human wisdom, and the proportion of this group of people was not low to begin with. In the beginning, people might be at a loss for their sudden acquisition of various superpowers, but they soon realized that they were not the only one in the world, and they did not have the fate of becoming the protagonist of a novel. There were several players in the same office. Even if they had superpowers, it did not make them seem special, unless it was some special ability. Ordinary players did not have the ability to create food and drink on their own. So life had to go on, and life had to go on. They still had to go to work, and they also had to do their jobs. Otherwise, they might be attacked by their superiors in the game and in real life. A certain level-y player who had a superpower that allowed the trash on the street to automatically gather together within a certain range accepted the social recruitment and became a street cleaner for 3 streets under the jurisdiction of Hangzhou City. With a monthly salary of 20,000, he officially opened up a new function for awakened supers. It cannot be said that the player's salary was too high. Normally, cleaning 3 streets would require at least 6 people to be hired, and it would take an entire day. However, this person only needed to ride an electric scooter around 3 streets, and in less than half an hour, he could make the streets as clean as if they had been washed. Giving him a monthly salary of 20,000 was not excessive at all. The treatment of this person opened up new ideas for many of the weaker level players. The country was also very happy to use this special method of using supers. After all, not everyone had combat power. Currently, the human race was the dominant race on Earth, and countries pursued peaceful coexistence. They could not easily start a war. Even awakened supers with combat abilities could not be used, so it was better to use this special method to reintegrate the awakened supers into society. In the past 10 years, this was precisely the change that had happened on Earth. Chen Guang saw it and felt his heart warm up. It was so infuriating, so infuriating. He could always see all kinds of awakened supers in modern cities like fish in water, pretending to be pigs to eat tigers. He was the biggest BUG. He had all his abilities, but he could only quietly watch others show off from outside the dimensional barrier. He could only be a bystander and could not participate in it himself. Not to mention others, Tingguang Group and Chengguang Group were the 2 major companies under him. One focused on entertainment, while the other focused on environmental protection and technology. After 10 years of development, they entered the world's top 500 companies at the same time, with a market value of $100 billion and $180 billion respectively. In the process of the technological explosion, Zhuo Jingxi made full use of the photocatalyst laboratory. This was not the end. As the photocatalyst laboratory continued to grow, the intelligence of the experimenters who joined the laboratory also exploded, allowing the scope of the laboratory to jump out of the photocatalyst field and further involve all aspects of basic material science. This meant that he had become the richest man in the world without doing anything. However, even if he had so much money now that he could buy an island to corrupt, it was useless. He could not go back. Chen Guang let out a long sigh and once again focused his mind on the world of creation. There were more and more portraits of the gods on the 9-story giant tree, and there were more and more intelligent life in the world of creation. The layers of microscopic world inside were also becoming more and more complete, and the level of life in a microscopic world was also becoming higher and higher. He did not know where the limit of the world of creation was, nor did he know what would happen if he continued to pour the origin energy of the Protoss into the world of creation, but this was certainly not something that the origin will of the endless divine realm would like to see. However, now that the Lord God and the origin will of the divine realm were in a deep sleep, it might just be a small nap for them, but for him and Earth, many years had passed. A total of 81 4th-tier worlds of the Blue Sky Cup were finally completed. Chen Guang used a total of 3,241st-tier to 4th-tier worlds of the Blue Sky Cup to lay a solid foundation for himself. He combined the divine power system of the endless divine realm with the abilities of the people on Earth and the universe, and gathered them on himself, making him an omnipotent being in a sense. Now, he was about to face the 5th-tier worlds of the Blue Sky, a total of 27. The first ability he had to face made him very confused. The legendary subjective psychokinesis, controlling everything with one's mind. In short, if he were to master it, as long as he had to face an existence of a lower level than him, he only needed to move his mind, and the other party could live or die if he wanted the other party to. Even if the other party was a large civilization that could control the Milky Way, he only needed to think about life and death from a distance, and this civilization could be created and destroyed in a day and night. He did not know how to practice this thing at all. It was simply metaphysics. It was like a novel author who wanted to write the characters in the book to die, and they died. If he wanted to write them to live, they came to life. Or it was like in some serialized dramas, where a popular character was clearly dead in the plot, but the readers voted for him to be alive. In the end, the scriptwriter really dragged out a reason and resurrected him. For example, forcefully saying that it was not this character who had died before, but another unlucky person who had been disguised as this character, forcefully replacing a prince with a leopard cat, also known as the legendary setting of resurrection. So, the way I practice is to first glare out the lamp with my eyes. Standing quietly on the floating cloud island, looking at the mahogany table in front of him and the long-lived LED lamp on the table, Chen Guang silently complained. This was metaphysics that science could not explain. Chapter 1307. Extinguish, 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 extinguish. If there was another person looking at Chen Guang in this cup, they would probably think that he was retarded. He sat upright in front of the redwood table, his eyes wide open as he stared at the LED lamp in front of him. He muttered as if he was chanting an incantation, making him look like a god. In fact, if he were to use other tricks, there were at least 10,000 ways to blind the lamp without any movement. However, he couldn't do that. He had already tried it once before, and the result was a clean self-explosion. Even though the spirit of the Holy Grail had become himself, his own hidden consciousness was not gentle and was very strict. Chen Guang felt that this Taishian study was too strange. Even though his spiritual power was very strong, there was no reason for him to just look at the lamp with his eyes and hope that it would be extinguished. Would it really be extinguished? If such a thing could really happen, then he could also stare at a certain girl and chant in his heart, "Take it off! Take it off! Take off your coat! Take off your underwear!" Then she really took it off. This was obviously very ridiculous. In other words, even if a similar incantation could really work on living beings, it could only be because his spiritual power was affecting others. However, the LED lamp was a dead object. It had no life, and it didn't have a soul or a mind. There was no reason for it to listen to him, right? However, since it existed, different planes would naturally have different rules. Since this telekinesis cup required him to do this, it meant that there were such rules in this plane. However, his view was still stuck in the past, and he subconsciously felt that it was impossible. However, just like every other ability he had learned in the past, no matter how inconceivable it seemed, as long as he was willing to believe and persevered in learning and trying to figure it out, he would definitely be able to learn it. As expected, as time passed, Chen Guang first deceived himself in the process of chanting the incantation and then turned into a real god. In his mind, something that he had thought about more than once, but had never seen before slowly appeared. It was the threads of fate. Since a long time ago, Chen Guang knew that all living beings in this world had their own different fates. Some people are blessed in life, and everything they do is smooth sailing. There were also some people who were destined to live a mediocre life. No matter how much they resisted or struggled, it was all in vain. Also, people's lives were full of misfortunes, and they would always encounter all sorts of unfortunate things. For example, his mother had contracted a terminal illness in her middle age. Fortunately, he had defied the heavens and changed her fate, saving her. Those who survived seemed to have bad fates, but in fact, there were obstacles in their path. If they could calmly cross it, then they would have a bright future ahead of them. If they couldn't cross it, or if they were always stuck outside the door, then their life would unknowingly be ordinary or sad. But even for these kinds of people, the direction of their destiny was still traceable. It was nothing more than a fork in the shape of a tree. No matter how the direction of the fork changed, the final range would still not be able to escape the scope of this tree of destiny. In addition, There were one-to-one threads of fate between all living beings, even if there were two seemingly unrelated people, such as a Huaxia in the Eastern Hemisphere and a black man in the Western Hemisphere. These two people seemed to be completely unrelated, but according to a certain principle, every two people in the world would definitely be connected through the connections of six people who knew each other. This might not be completely accurate, but if the number of these six people was further increased to a dozen or even hundreds of people, then the network would definitely be pulled over. Then, the fates of these two people were also implicated. It was just that the fetters were deep and shallow, and the influence between them could be big or small. This principle was not only applicable between humans and animals, animals and animals, or even between humans and plants, or between plants and microorganisms. As long as there was life, there would be fate. If one could see the threads of fate of these living beings and then stretch out their hands to fiddle with them, they would be able to control their fate. As for inorganic things or machinery, in the past, Chen Guang did not think that these things also had fate. Would a light bulb care when it was lit or not? Would a rock care when it was crushed into powder? But now he believed it, because the LED lamp in front of him had really been extinguished by his curse. At the moment when the LED lamp was extinguished, he clearly saw a bright thread suddenly break above the lamp bead. It was the fate of this lamp. Then, the powerful training of the Holy Grail continued. He cursed the legs of the mahogany table in front of him, cursed the ground under his feet to crack, and cursed the sea level in front of him to shrink by 3 feet. After completing this series of actions, he was actually sent to the second layer of the same world within a cup, where he controlled the fate of millions of living beings as the master of fate. Of course, he could not control the life and death of millions of living beings on this continent from the very beginning. Instead, he started with the identity of a shepherd and first took care of a flock of sheep. After taking care of the sheep, his scope of business expanded to all the livestock on this continent. After completing this operation, he took care of all the animals on this continent, and then continued to expand to the sea creatures. In short, after a period of time that even he did not want to remember, he finally became a qualified master of fate on this continent. He controlled time and everything, and arranged the fate of all living beings, and even the mountains and rivers in an orderly manner. After finally completing his mission and leaving this world within a cup, Chen Guang was not immediately sent to the next world within the Heavenly Sunlight Cup. Instead, he was given a lot of time to reflect on what he had gained during this period of time. In his mind, he could not help but compare what he had gained this time with the Bell of Fate that he had seen in the realm of fate in the past. First of all, his current level of control over fate was definitely not as precise as that big bell, and he would still be affected by the subjective emotions of humans. In short, he was emotional but not rational. In addition, the psychokinesis of fate that he had mastered in the Heavenly Sunlight Cup should probably be the foundation of the Bell of Fate. Based on the previous performance of the Holy Grail, this might very well be a long-term problem. In the 6th, 7th, and 8th Guang Mo Tian Tian, there should be additional information related to fate in the 6th, 7th, and 8th Immortal Heaven, which would allow him to get closer and closer to the Bell of Fate. It was even possible that his final goal was to devour the Bell of Fate. After a while, the next world within the 5th Heavenly Sunlight Cup appeared, and as expected, his guess was verified. This was actually still a test of his control over fate, but the scope of the test this time had changed from psychokinesis to prophecy. Using psychokinesis allowed Chen Guang to see through the fate of others and change it. Prophecy, on the other hand, was to see through the future and see through the past, so that the fate of a person or something from the past to the present could not be hidden. On the surface, the effect of prophecy might not be as effective as psychokinesis, but that was not the case. If one could predict fate, then one would be able to change fate in advance. This was the ability to combine fate and time together. After a long time, when Chen Guang came out of the prophecy realm, he felt refreshed. It was indeed powerful. He had finally seen one of the 9 great special worlds apart from the realm of fate and the real world. That's right, it was the realm of time. Chapter 1308. The past, the future, and the present were the three forms of time. Although he was currently practicing prophecy, it was impossible for him to accurately predict something or someone's life path just by talking about it. The real great prophecy spell could see through the past and present lives of the prophecy target and extract the threads of fate that belonged to that person. Only after careful and precise analysis could a conclusion be reached. This was easy to say, but it was not easy to do. For example, on Earth, although everyone was an individual, this individual had to interact with his family, friends, classmates, colleagues, neighbors, and even the owner of the snack bar downstairs. For example, he bought an expired pack of crispy noodle snacks at the snack bar. After eating it, he had diarrhea and ruined an important lecture. Everyone's thread of fate never existed independently, but because of this person's connection with society as a whole, it couldn't be separated from it. For example, an ordinary office worker might look ordinary in the first half of his life, but one day he might be helping an honest boss to park his car in the parking lot, and the boss happened to be going the same way as him. The two of them chatted as they walked, and the boss realized that the office worker's area of expertise happened to be the position that he was lacking in. Therefore, the boss gave him a new position. It didn't seem to be particularly good, but this person did it with ease and familiarity. Then, when the middle-level leaders of the company saw that the person was personally pulled back by the boss, they thought that the person had a deeper special relationship with the boss. Therefore, they took care of the person in their daily work. Under the care of the middle-level leaders, the person grew up quickly. He made full use of the field he was good at and walked to the peak of his life. In the end, the life of an ordinary person changed because of a chance encounter. If he hadn't gotten up half an hour earlier that morning because of insomnia and arrived at the parking lot half an hour earlier than usual, he wouldn't have the patience to help when he saw someone parking sideways and in trouble, and he wouldn't have had the second half of his life. In the process of changing his fate, he intersected with his boss and the middle-level leaders of the company, but the interaction with his former colleagues was diluted. At the same time, because his average monthly salary increased by 2,000 yuan, his family was just rich enough to muster up the courage to mortgage a second house. The second house strengthened the relationship between him and his parents. After moving his parents to the city, his parents could help him and his wife take care of their children. This way, he could spend more time on work instead of being trapped at home all day long. In addition, because his income had increased slightly, he could save money every month to buy some skincare product for his wife that he couldn't bear to buy before. This further strengthened the relationship between him and his wife, and made the relationship between him and his wife even closer. In this person's original fate, the two of them should have quarreled over small things over a long period of time and finally parted ways after 3 years. He should have been even more mediocre after the divorce and lived a muddle-headed life. But everything was changed in a coincidence. The fate of an office worker was so complicated. Even if he lived in the mountains and had almost no contact with the outside world, his fate would be simpler, but he still couldn't exist independently. If there were no sudden changes that severely changed his life, he should have lived in the mountains for the rest of his life. Every once in a while, he would cut some wood or collect some game, or he would pick some wild Chinese herbs and sell them to the merchants who came here once every month or so. But perhaps one day, a group of second-generation rich kids with nothing better to do would like to come to the mountains to hunt, or perhaps experience life for a bit. In short, even if he seemed to be a loner, he couldn't escape the shroud of the whole world. No one's fate could be isolated, and this was only the great prophecy spell for an individual. If he were to predict the direction of a nation, there would be more factors involved. For example, there was a famous story about a horse's hoof that wasn't nailed properly, leading to the defeat of a war and further the destruction of a nation. This could be a joke, but it could also be true. However, it could not be denied that it was theoretically feasible. Everything that Chun Guang experienced in the great prophecy realm was to continuously polish and improve his understanding of fate. Prophesying after understanding was actually much more difficult than simply and crudely using telekinesis to forcefully change it. Of course, there was no difference between the two abilities, and each had its own merits. The process of training him in the realm of the cup was also a gradual process. There were steps, plans, and arrangements. It allowed him to start from the fate of an ant, but in the end, it allowed him to reach the realm of Nostradamus, who could see across thousands of years and accurately predict the life and death of a planet. To verify the accuracy of his prophecy, the realm and the cup even forced the flow of time on the planet to accelerate. In the brief 5 minutes that Chen Guang thought he had waited, the planet finally crossed 3,000 years and headed towards destruction. Chen Guang could not help but sigh. Whether Nostradamus truly existed in the Earth's universe, or if he was really that awesome, was another matter. But to the life on the planet, he was the most hated prophet. Even so, he had no choice. He had left a warning with hieroglyphs 3,000 years ago, but the progress of civilization on the planet was not enough to step out of the planet in 3,000 years. In the end, when the planet was torn apart, the billion intelligent beings on it could only look up in despair at the skies, watching as an interstellar meteor that was half the size of their own planet crashed down viciously, engulfed in blazing flames. When he deduced the fate of the planet, Chen Guang had also expended a great deal of energy peeling off the countless fates that could not be expressed in billions, analyzing and deducing them one by one to reach that conclusion after 3,000 years. In fact, he could observe that the trajectory of the interstellar meteor would reach the living planet in 3,000 years. In the entire process of civilization's development, they had more than one chance for technological explosion, but they had missed it due to their obsession with war. Otherwise, they would have developed to the level of interstellar travel 200 years ago, or at least launch interstellar strike weapons to shatter the meteor before it reached their planet. Such was the fate that Chen Guang prophesied, including the planet, all life on it, and even its rocks. War after war had hindered the progress of their civilization, and the reasons and origins of the war were equally bizarre. For example, two nomadic tribes would start a war over a lost sheep, or because of an or that was mistaken for a rare treasure. All of these were seen through by Chen Guang. However, he knew that this could only be considered as a beginner. The higher the level of the dimension, the more complicated the rules. There were more factors that could affect and interfere with the direction of fate, and the more life forms and materials were involved. He could predict the planetary civilization in that low-level dimension, but he might not even be able to see through the divine kingdom built by the gods in the endless divine realm. After leaving the world in a cup, Chen Guang looked at the Earth's universe again and tried to deduce the fate of the Earth. After a while, he shook his head with a strange expression. It was really strange. According to the process of the universe's history, the Earth should have been gone a long time ago. Perhaps it was a piece of interstellar garbage that was accidentally thrown out by some advanced civilization, or maybe it was a gamma ray burst, or maybe it was a giant comet's tail sweeping across the sun, causing the Earth to not receive light for more than 100 years. In short, in the entire billions of years of the Earth's history, there were at least 5 events that should have completely destroyed all life on the Earth. However, the life on the Earth stubbornly survived and turned misfortunes into blessings until today, when humans were born. These coincidences, of course, also included the spiritual body of the level 3 civilization that happened to pass by the solar system. Every crisis was resolved without the people on the Earth noticing. He couldn't hide it anymore. The autumn of 1999, he couldn't hide it anymore. The summer of 2008, it was a tragedy that he couldn't bear to recall. Ahem. In short, there seemed to be a force that didn't belong to the Earth's universe, protecting the progress of the civilization on this azure planet. Chen Guang nodded silently. Yes, it must be the old man's previous life. Since I've decided to let the old man be reborn on this planet, I can't not protect this place. This revealed a fact. His previous life, which he didn't know whether it really existed or not, must have controlled rules and laws of a higher level than the Earth's universe. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to interfere with the normal operation of the universe more than once after 10 billion years. Before he had time to show off, the next world of the sun-dazzling cup suddenly appeared. This time, what awaited him was the eye of truth. Yes, it was still about fate. This required him to have eyes that could see through the truth and falsehood. Fate could also lie. Sometimes people thought that it was the peak of life, but it might just be a trap. For example, there was an office worker who had climbed to the top by driving for his boss. After he became rich, he had a change of heart and found a mistress. As a result, when the mistress and the first wife were fighting, he tried to stop the fight, but he was carelessly stabbed in the throat and died miserably. Fate didn't just lie to others, it could also lie to oneself. This was the reason behind the legendary 3 illusions of life. Obtaining the eye of truth could avoid the illusion of thinking that he could counterattack and that he would definitely be able to counterattack, instead of, I can counterattack. This eye of truth wasn't an independent existence. It also unveiled the mysterious veil of another of the 9 special cups for Chen Guang. It was the combination of the real world and the realm of life. Chapter 1309. Chen Guang realized that ever since he reached the 5th level of the brilliant sun realm, the cup realm that appeared served as a connecting link. On one hand, it led him to transcend the shackles of human common sense in the 4th level of the brilliant sun realm. On the other hand, it combined the uniqueness of the 9 special planes and brought him step by step in the direction of God. A long time ago, when Chen Guang saw the realm of life for the first time, he clearly felt that the plane was extraordinary. Now that he thought about it, he was right. The 1st level of the heavenly Holy Grail represented man, and the 9th level represented God. Then, the 5th level of the brilliant sun realm was in between God and man. After understanding the key points, Chen Guang squinted his newly acquired eye of truth. It seemed that he was going to take the path of humanity to God and never return. Just as he was thinking about this, his figure flashed, and he was pulled into the next cup realm. It was called absolute speed. He felt that speed was nothing more than running fast. Was there a need to specially take out a precious spot in the brilliant sun cup realm for him to waste? Wasn't the old man already the fastest young man in human history? Even the agility players in the game who were known for their speed were no match for him. Even the Protoss in the endless divine realm might not be able to outrun him if they didn't use their divine power and only relied on their physical strength. But complaining was one thing. Since the Holy Grail had placed a task in front of him, he definitely couldn't refuse it. When Chen Guang entered the cup realm and felt the so-called absolute speed, he immediately understood that things weren't as simple as he thought. He was indeed the fastest human, but he wasn't the fastest existence in the Earth's universe. Now, the requirement of the 5th level of the brilliant Sun Cup realm was for him to reach the theoretical maximum speed of the Earth's universe, which was 300,000 kilometers per second. Chen Guang didn't feel too good. He looked down at his poor pair of hams and thought to himself, I'm serious. Run at the speed of light with these legs? Do you think I'm a Flash? Wait, I seem to have misunderstood something. This so-called absolute speed doesn't necessarily mean that I have to run with the strength of my legs. It means that I have to use some kind of ability to reach the speed of light. Also, even if I have to use my legs to run, if the rules of this cup realm allow it, I might really be able to do it. Just like the Flash in the movies or comics, who could run at 3 billion times the speed of light with just his legs? Isn't this bullshit? Or rather, even if he relied on his legs, according to the rules of this cup plane, he could do it according to the rules of this plane. Don't ask me for a reason. As long as it's allowed by the laws of this plane, then it's possible. The rules, the settings had to say, if the settings said it could, then it would do. Chen Guang felt that his understanding of the planar law was slowly deepening. His method was different from that of the God race. The God race cultivated and tried to figure things out bit by bit. The God race first saw the rules and then used their hearts to understand the rules. As for himself, he used a human's perspective. The human's thinking was very empty, but it could accurately interpret and understand the rules. First, he would give himself a hint that he could do it in this cup realm. Of course, the reason was his understanding of the rules, so he could do it. In the cup world of absolute speed, he had limitless acceleration. Whether it was floating or flying, there was no problem. After all, his displacement speed was just that fast, and his body could still withstand it. Moreover, it wasn't teleportation like the teleportation of a spatial position, but a true teleportation of a certain distance within the space. At first, he ran. He used his physical strength to the limit, and the cheetah could only eat his dust. Even a top-class sports car with a speed of 2.8 seconds couldn't catch up to him. The eternal and tireless running allowed Chun Guang, who had the wind god's legs, to surpass the limits of humans and evolve to an unimaginable degree. His technique of exerting force also became more refined day after day and year after year of striding forward. If he could run 10 meters with 1 unit of strength before, then, after a period of special training, he could run 20 meters with the same unit of strength. Whether it was the efficiency of his physical strength or the power of his physical body, he was improving at an extremely fast speed in this cup realm of absolute speed. He hadn't guessed wrong. The rules in this cup realm were completely different from the Earth's universe. At this time, he only looked like a human. His body was a combination of divine power, genetic power, the power of the Holy Grail, mysterious power, true martial worlds, yin-yang qi, and other strange things. Before, it was only because of the guidance of his genes that he deliberately imitated the structure of a human body. But now it was different. In this cup realm of absolute speed, where he had unlocked the genetic constraint, he broke through the limits of his genes again and again as he trained hard. This wasn't a simple recombination of genes in a three-dimensional structure. Chun Guang's genes weren't three-dimensional, but never-ending multi-dimensional structure. After a long time, when Chun Guang relied on his legs to break the sound barrier for the first time, he first felt that he had crossed an important threshold. Then he stared blankly for a moment and stopped. At first, he found it hard to believe. He lowered his head and looked at his hands and feet. He felt that something was wrong. Why did I break the sound barrier for no reason? If I return to Earth now, won't I have to apply for a pilot's license if I want to go out for a walk? Should I get a driving license and stick it on my body? In addition, he was still a bit confused. Breaking the sound barrier seemed very powerful, but it was still far from the absolute speed of light, 300,000 kilometers per second. How to increase it from 300 meters per second to 300,000 kilometers per second? This was simply an insurmountable moat. He couldn't understand how to achieve it just by imagining it in his head. In addition, photons had almost no weight. Things like light pressure only existed in theory. That was why photons, which were between the state of matter and energy, could reach 300,000 kilometers per second. But he was a living person with a physical body. How much energy would he need to reach the speed of light? It might not be enough even if he burned the Earth. Perhaps the energy released by the sun in a few years would be enough to accelerate a matter of his weight to the speed of light. This was very exaggerated and very terrifying. He silently turned his head and looked at the long track behind him. He didn't know how long he had run on that endless track. When he turned his head and looked forward, he didn't know where the track would extend to. Does the Holy Grail want me to keep running forward from here to increase my speed continuously? Isn't this too casual? Is it really effective? Just as he was thinking about this, there was a sudden movement behind him. A formless liquid slowly appeared in the air and dripped down. It then condensed into a strange monster that was completely black. It had 2 heads and 8 limbs, and there were rock-like spikes on its back. It was crawling on the ground. The 4 limbs on the back of the monster were extremely thick and strong. One look, and one could tell that it had explosive power. As for the 4 limbs in front of it, they were relatively slender and had sharp claws. As the monster moved, the sharp claws shook slightly. Deep black cracks appeared in the air in front of the claws. This monster's claws could obviously tear through space easily. Now that he was the spirit of the Holy Grail, he didn't need the Holy Grail to remind him of the current situation. In the next second, the description of the monster appeared in his mind. A must-kill beast. A must-kill. What a simple and clear explanation. Words were as precious as gold. I get it. Isn't this like the legendary running training where a husky chases after a person to stimulate the potential of a person? I get it. But is there a need to come up with such a tough thing? Chen Guang was all too familiar with the Holy Grail's nature now. The simpler the explanation, the more there was no room for negotiation. He didn't even need to guess the attack methods of the must-kill beast. In any case, he would definitely die if he was touched. There was no doubt about it. If it was said to be a must-kill, then even if it was set to be a must-kill, it would still be a must-kill. Run. He didn't have much time to think. With a boom, he broke through the sound barrier and sprinted forward. The must-kill beast roared repeatedly. Its four thick and strong hind legs stomped on the ground and turned into a black wind, chasing after Chen Guang's butt. After running for an unknown distance, Chen Guang turned back slightly and felt slightly relieved. The must-kill beast's setting was quite human-like. Its running speed was actually the same as his, just slightly faster than the speed of sound. But isn't this training my endurance? This doesn't seem to match the setting of absolute speed, right? He immediately regretted thinking about this matter, because he discovered that the unlucky must-kill beast had actually secretly sped up without a sound. If everyone was moving at 1.01 times the speed of sound before, then it had suddenly become a multiple of 1.01 times 1.01. Although it had only increased by a little, it was already faster than his current top speed. The distance between the two of them narrowed. Looking back at the must-kill beast's four limbs dancing in the air, the cracks in the space flickering like a spider web, Chen Guang felt that the pressure was very great. Chapter 1310. Right now, he had already reached the limit of his physical strength. Even if he risked his life to run, there was no way he could go any faster. But he definitely couldn't go on like this. The distance between Chen Guang and the must-kill beast behind him was not far to begin with, about 20 to 30 meters. Right now, the speed of the two seemed to be almost the same, but even if it was only 100th faster, the distance between him and the must-kill beast was still shrinking at a rate of more than 3 meters per second. The must-kill beast's sharp claws chased after Chen Guang like a death god. Chen Guang had no doubt about the power of the must-kill beast. He would definitely die if he touched it. He just couldn't be sure how many chances he had to resurrect in this absolute speed world in the cup, because up until now, there had been no notification in his heart. Maybe he would die after dying once, or maybe he could resurrect 100 times. Who knew? In short, he had become the Holy Grail spirit. But because of this, Chen Guang knew how strict the rules and regulations of the Holy Grail were. It was absolute, and there was no room for negotiation. After running for a few more seconds, the must-kill beast behind Chen Guang was finally getting closer and closer to him. The sharp claws didn't scratch him, but the spatial crack it created rubbed against his back lightly. It was a touch as simple as a breath, but Chen Guang felt like he was struck by lightning. The protective force he was so proud of was as fragile as paper in the face of the spatial crack. It disappeared after a light scratch, leaving a long bloody mark on his back. No blood flowed out, because the place where the spatial crack passed through was completely hollowed out. The cut was smooth and tidy, and it was even more useful than a scalpel. It was the kind that would definitely not hurt when cutting an appendix. At this moment, Chen Guang was practically roaring in his mind. Is this the end for me? This doesn't make sense. I can't be the first male protagonist in history to be killed by his own cheat. This is too king embarrassing. Then the question is, what should I do now? Chen Guang racked his brains. All the potential in his body, including the new version of inner energy, his own body's ability, and even his own willpower, had been used to the extreme. He really couldn't think of any way to continue increasing his speed in this plane. Should I try setting a speed for myself? In any case, I'm the main body of the Holy Grail spirit. In any case, the maximum speed limit in this absolute speed plane is very high. Should I directly set my speed to 1 times the speed of sound? When he thought of it, he gave it a try. He really forced himself to think about it. The method was not very profound. It was just to keep muttering to himself. The Redeemer's top speed is 1 times the speed of sound. 1 times. 1 times. In any case, he just kept repeating it. As he repeated it, he sank his mind even further allowing his thoughts to fuse into the depths of the absolute speed cup world source laws. It was like a person standing in front of a spinning machine, stretching out his hand to fiddle with the different colored threads on each spindle, finally using the crisscrossing threads to spin a perfect scroll. He had succeeded. Just as the sharp claws of the must-kill beast were about to dig into his back, just as his back had already been torn by the spatial cracks, his speed suddenly accelerated, reaching one times the speed of sound with extreme precision. Chen Guang was overjoyed. After his consciousness became the spirit of the Holy Grail, he had finally developed a truly powerful technique. The legendary cheat that can control a cheat. That's right, I am the spirit of the Holy Grail, so I can, under the rules of the cup world, forcibly set some parameters and conditions in the cup world, changing the source laws of the cup world source laws. In other words, this is the legendary forcibly set a killing mechanism. The reason why I can do this is very simple. In the cup world, no matter if it's my own body or any other factors from matter to life, everything is essentially created by the settings of the cup world. For example, if Chen Guang went to the Sea of Transient right now, as long as he was willing, he could even create a new living person from his soul to his body. Of course, this would be very difficult, because even if the life forms in the Sea of Transient were of a lower level and their souls were relatively incomplete, the hardest thing to fathom was the human heart. To create a native of the Sea of Transient with true intelligence and emotions, he needed to be extremely meticulous, without the slightest mistake. Otherwise, the slightest mistake would result in a huge error. For example, if he originally wanted to create a bold and unrestrained female toilet bowl, but his hand trembled when setting the settings, and he made a slight mistake, it was very likely that the created character would become a bold and unrestrained female toilet bowl lily. This was very despairing. Of course, under the premise that the total number of souls in the Sea of Transient was fixed, adding a soul out of thin air and creating a new life was already an ability of the creator of the Sea of Transient. It was the same in the world of absolute speed. He activated the creator's cheat and changed the settings on his body, forcefully suppressing the must-kill beast in terms of speed. However, he didn't feel pleased for long. Just as he pulled the distance to 30 meters, he found that the muscles on his legs were showing signs of collapsing. Obviously, one times the speed of sound exceeded the limit of what his body could endure. Even the internal energy protecting his body couldn't mitigate the destructive power of such a heavy load. The Earth Burner's ability had been swallowed by the new version of the Inner Force. Although the new version of the Inner Force had a strong healing ability, the burden was constantly destroying his body, and the speed of healing could not keep up with the speed of destruction. Chen Guang had no choice but to reduce his speed to 1 times the speed of sound again. This time, the collapse stopped, and he quickly recovered. However, the must-kill beast behind him caught up again. The must-kill beast that forcibly set its speed was not like him. It didn't know fatigue, it didn't consume any energy at all, and its speed was constant. It was more permanent than a perpetual motion machine. Chen Guang had no choice but to increase his speed again. This time, he found a little change. When the distance between him and the must-kill beast was increased to 40 meters, his muscles began to collapse again. Chen Guang suddenly understood. I understand. My body is evolving, slowly adapting to 1 times the speed of sound. Therefore, whenever his muscles collapsed to the point where they couldn't bear it anymore, he would slow down and recover. After the recovery was complete, he would increase his speed again. Every time he increased the distance between him and the must-kill beast, it would slowly increase from the initial 30 meters to 40, 50, and even more than 1,000 meters. After a long time, Chen Guang's body finally adapted to 1 times the speed of sound under the repeated evolution. He was about to stop and take a breath, but a loud music came from behind him. That's right, it was music. Chen Guang's mind froze for a moment before he realized it. Wasn't this the exclusive background music for the evolution of Digital Tyrannosaurus in Digimon? As expected, 3 seconds later, the lines sounded in the world within the cup. Must kill beast. Evolution 2 times the speed of sound. Chen Guang silently gave a thumbs up. The spirit of the Holy Grail was indeed the clone of the old man's subconscious. Everyone was in the late stage of naming cancer, and there was no cure. He didn't panic. I'll evolve too, 25 times the speed of sound. After a long time. 2 times the speed of sound. Super evolution, super evolution, super evolution. When Chen Guang's speed finally surpassed the fourth universal speed, which was the threshold of 120 kilometers per second, he discovered that the energy and movement method of his body alone were no longer enough to support him to continue increasing his speed. Without any shackles, his evolution began to move in another direction. His body began to become lighter. When Chen Guang's speed exceeded 3,000 kilometers per second, his lightened body could no longer meet the requirements to continue increasing his speed. His evolution method began to evolve toward using the force between molecules to propel himself forward. He roughly understood that if he wanted to reach the speed of light, his entire body would have to conform to the wave-particle duality. Chapter 13:11. There is no setting for wind resistance in this dimension, but air and molecules really existed. This was, of course, the effect of the absolute speed territory. It could be summed up in this sentence. There is air, molecules, and atoms, but the matter in the air has no collision volume. However, if Chen Guang wanted to reach the speed of light, he still couldn't rely on primitive means. He had to turn himself into a light that could stop and move at will, so that he could maintain his speed after surpassing the speed of the fourth universe. The energy transformation of the body was obviously beyond the scope of physical structure, and Chen Guang wasn't sure if his genetic level could reach such a high level. While thinking about this in his mind, Chen Guang couldn't help but turn back to look at the must-kill beast behind him. He really envied this completely brainless guy. He was simply carefree and didn't need to think or consider anything. He didn't need to care about evolution or settings at all. He only needed to follow behind him, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws as if he was going to eat him, and then he could continue to increase his speed and bite him. Forcibly setting the speed was too much of a bug, too shameless. Why could the must-kill beast be as fast as it wanted to be? Was there logic eaten by dogs? Complaining wouldn't change his situation, but it would only make his life more miserable. Just as he finished complaining, the must-kill beast behind him changed again. It let out a painful roar and began to split from middle. In the blink of an eye, it split into two. Two must-kill beasts, which were only half the size of the previous ones, appeared behind Chen Guang. They were a little smaller, but their forms were exactly the same as before. Chen Guang blinked, inexplicably feeling that these two guys looked a little cute, but he immediately changed his mind. Cue my ass. The two of them had split up again. In a breath's time, the two must-kill beasts split again, and two became four. They looked smaller, but their names didn't change at all. They were still called must-kill beasts. This meant that although they had become smaller, each individual still maintained the effect of a one-hit kill, absolutely not reduced. This was not the end. After splitting up, the speed of the four must-kill beasts suddenly increased. In an instant, they surpassed the speed of the fourth universe, reaching an outrageous 150 kilometers per second, which was a full 30 kilometers per second faster than the current Chen Guang. Seeing that the distance between them was closing once again, Chen Guang hurriedly applied a forceful buff on his body. Screw it, I'll just go up to 180 kilometers per second first. After setting up the buff, the frequency at which his legs moved did not increase, but he could clearly feel that every step he took was much lighter. Just as he expected, although he still looked like a human, his body was gradually turning illusory. Not only that, but every time he took a step forward, his entire body would leave behind an afterimage. This was not an illusion, but a real shadow. Chen Guang understood that this was his energy-transformed body being elongated during high-speed movement. This was not an illusory shadow. The whole shadow was real, and each illusory shadow was a part of his body. It turned out that his previous worries were superfluous. He had underestimated the high-end level of his genes, which even subverted his understanding of genes. In his previous concept, the so-called gene was nothing more than a long piece of DNA that represented the hereditary characteristics of organisms. It was a double-helix macromolecule deoxyribonucleic acid that could be expressed in three-dimensional space. If the level of human science and technology reached the level below nanometers, and they were not afraid of trouble, they could even completely use artificial methods to manipulate and fiddle with atoms, achieving the synthesis of pure artificial DNA molecular chains. In theory, this could be achieved. Since artificial DNA chains could be synthesized, it was possible to further cultivate embryos on the basis of this DNA, and then it was even possible to create a living person out of thin air. Creating an artificial human that was exactly the same as a real human out of thin air might mean that humans had uncovered the mystery of life. But now, Chen Guang had verified a result from another perspective. Under the rules of the Earth's universe, it was impossible to achieve this with the knowledge of humans on Earth. Even if a perfect embryo could be artificially coded and an artificial human could be synthesized, the final life form could only be a complete dementia without thinking and intelligence. Even if an artificial intelligence was forcefully stuffed into his brain, his life level could only stay at the level of artificial intelligence. Under the rules of the Earth's universe, he would never be able to become a real human. This was because DNA was not a simple three-dimensional material structure at all, but a unique life code in the entire universe. The fineness of this life code was far from the atomic level revealed on the surface of DNA. It was even below the level of quark particles. It was restricted by the rules of the current universe, and no species, civilization, technology, or any special ability could touch it. No matter how detailed the research was, they could only try to guide its natural evolution from the outside, but it was impossible to restructure and control it from the most basic level. No matter how ordinary humans on Earth were, they had a unique life code that could not be replicated in the entire universe. This code was not only applicable to physical creatures like humans on Earth, it was also applicable to energy life forms, and it was also applicable to mechanical civilizations. Even cosmic mutants that were half dark matter and the other half were various basic forces could not escape the rules of this life code. Under the overall laws of the endless God realm, all life forms, regardless of which plane they were in, had their own corresponding life code. DNA was only the surface feature that was the easiest to understand for humans on Earth. Behind the seemingly traceable DNA double helix structure, there was a huge amount of data that even the storage equipment of the entire Milky Way galaxy could not store. This was the mystery of life. Because of the difference in life level, Chen Guang's life code was infinitely more than that of humans on Earth. The amount of data was so huge that if it had mass, it would be infinitely larger than the universe. The end of his evolution would not stop at the level of energy life form. He could even become a conceptual life form. The so-called conceptual life form did not even need a physical body, nor did it need energy that truly existed. It had completely become a kind of theoretical existence. As long as a certain life form in the endless divine realm had a memory of his existence, he would truly exist. Or if someone mentioned it, he would truly exist. His existence was objective. He was objective in the rules of every plane and every universe. In the past, Chen Guang had never been able to understand the reality of such an objective, nor did he understand the theory behind it. However, the moment his body began to energize, he received an indescribable amount of information and understood his current life form. In that case, in front of him was a broad road leading to the speed of light. The must-kill beast was still chasing behind him, and he continued to run along the endless track. If life was said to be a long journey, then Chen Guang's journey was endless. If the path toward the speed of light was said to be leading him to the edge of time and space, then he, who was constantly increasing his speed, was walking toward the end of time. 180 kilometers per second. 300 kilometers, 800 kilometers, 1,000, 5,000, 10, 000, 100, 000, 300, 000. When he finally turned into a long beam of light and reached the true speed of light, he still maintained a clear consciousness. At this moment, he himself was a beam of light, but his body was very long. The position of his shadow closest to the must-kill beast was at least a light year away from the front. However, his thoughts were still clear. Now, Chun Guang's thinking speed should be faster than the speed of light, countless times faster. This was because he could clearly perceive his own tail and head with his thoughts. If he still used the thoughts of an earthling, then he would not be able to understand what medium his thoughts were transmitted through. However, now that he had a new understanding of the settings, he did not need to consider the medium at all. As long as he could do it in the settings, then he could do it. This medium could be the curvature beyond the limit of light, or it could be a certain rule, or it could even include time. For example, when he began to think about a problem, the fragment in his mind would first jump to a year ago, and then jump through a year's time to the level that he wanted to see and think at the moment. Or outside of time and space, there was a fourth level that three-dimensional life could not understand. The flow and transmission of his thoughts happened in the fourth level. This fourth level completely surpassed the concept of time and space, and it could also be called infinite. Infinite distance, infinite lifespan, infinite speed. Everything was infinite, just like the world of creation that he had created with his own hands. After understanding this principle, in Chun Guang's eyes, the absolute speed in the world in the cup became completely different from before. This was the so-called 10,000 years in a blink of an eye. When the speed reached the same speed as the speed of light, time did not stop. It was still moving forward very objectively, second by second. This once again subverted the understanding that humans on Earth had of the speed of light. Many people thought that when the speed of a spaceship reached or exceeded the speed of light, time could flow backward, or at least stop. This was obviously not accurate. Assuming that photons also had lives, assuming that photons themselves were alive, then for this photon that had thoughts, wouldn't time still move forward? What could truly transcend time was the thoughts of photon life, which was the thoughts of the current Chun Guang. Then if there was a life that lived in the thoughts of photon life, this special life could transcend time. When a must-kill beast behind him finally disappeared, Chun Guang stopped completely. After his body returned to human form, he silently looked up at the sky. He touched the edge of another of the 9 special worlds in the cup, the world of space. The absolute speed in the cup of the sun was the combination of the world of time and the world of space. It was in the middle of the 2 special worlds in the cup. When Chun Guang returned to the void in the cup, he looked at the gradually emerging shadows of the world of time and the world of space, and then looked at the small ball in the cup of the absolute speed that he had just come out of, and his face showed a look of understanding. After the world of time and the world of space appeared, they slowly floated up and stood side by side with the real world and the world of life that had already appeared. They were below the world of creation, but above the sea of time and the sea of time. The arcs and positions of the layout of the 4 special worlds that had already been revealed made Chun Guang feel that they were familiar, just like the chaotic 9 gods' peak that he had seen before. If all 9 special worlds appeared, would the ring structure be exactly the same as the chaotic 9 gods' peak? As Chun Guang thought so, he gradually became obsessed. Chapter 13:12. Ever since he became the main body of the spirit of the Holy Grail, he already knew that the Holy Grail had 9 worlds in a cup that had existed since the beginning. They were very different, of extremely high levels, and formed their own systems. For example, the world of life that he had encountered a long time ago, or the world of reality that had merged with the Earth's universe. Now, there was also the world of time and the world of emptiness, which represented the basic laws. Even though he had never explored them and didn't know the specific structure inside, he knew that one of the 2 huge spheres represented the limit of space, and the other represented the limit of time. Then, what would the remaining 5 special worlds in a cup be? Chun Guang took out a table before him and held onto his chin as he pondered. In fact, he was a little anxious. Before he knew it, another year had passed in the Earth's universe. The new social structure formed by the awakened and ordinary people was steadily moving forward. Everything was steadily moving from chaos to order. This was originally a good thing, but Chen Guang had been gone for too long. It had been so long that even though everyone knew that he wouldn't be in any danger and would often receive all kinds of messages from him, not seeing him for a whole 11 years still made people feel uneasy. The women and friends who had already become awakened were fine. Because of their abilities and the strengthening of their bodies using reward points, everyone's aging speed was greatly reduced. If the average lifespan of humans in the past was 70 years, then even though no players had died of natural causes yet, based on the speed at which they aged, they would at least be over 200 years old. Chen Guang felt that top-level players like Liu Fei and Ti Chizhua, even if they reached 100 years old, their bodily functions would at most not exceed that of an ordinary 30 years old, and they would still be able to give birth in one go. He didn't have to worry too much about this. But none of his family members had awakened. It was inconceivable that the people around him were all affected by his fate, and their paths as players were often much smoother than others. Almost all of them had awakened, and the improvement of their abilities after awakening was far greater than that of ordinary players. But none of his family members had made any moves. Although they had benefited from the many businesses and Yumeng left behind by Chen Guang, Heaven's Ministry had never slacked off on the security of Chen Guang's family. The Chun family's 7 aunts, cousins, and so on were all living very well. However, out of the dozens of people in the Chun family whose bloodline was the closest to his, not a single one had successfully awakened. In the past, players and ordinary people were separated, so it was fine if no one knew. But now, the awakened players had already integrated into the lives of ordinary people. After the Thunder Hand suppressed a large number of restless awakened players, everything was perfectly integrated. Now, even the people selling roasted sweet potatoes on the streets were psychics who heated them with their hands. The Chun family, a prominent family in the county, did not have a single awakened. This was very embarrassing. What was even more embarrassing was that after 11 years, Chen Guang's parents and family members had aged a lot. Chen Guang thought to himself that from the perspective of genes, which was also the biological code, his family should be the closest to him. Even if there would be some slight differences, they should be closer than others. The differences could only be reflected in small differences, such as whether the nose was tall or not, whether the eyes were big or not, and how much difference in height. Wasn't it because the genes of blood relatives were too similar? Wasn't it easy to mutate and cause deformities? Maybe it was because the most perfect genetic combination of the entire Chun family for thousands of years was concentrated in me alone. So I could be so awesome? As the hope of the entire village, I took all the talents of others? Or in other words, the total amount of awakened talents that each set of genes could enjoy was limited. The total amount of talents of my Chun family was reflected in me alone, so others couldn't do anything about it. Chen Guang thought that it was really possible, but he couldn't change anything. However, when he thought of the possibility that he would only be able to return to Earth after a few decades, and by then, his parents would have already died of old age. As a son, it would be meaningless no matter how much money he gave them now, no matter how high his status was. However, while he was complaining in his mind, he was pulled into the next world in the cup, the combination of the time realm and the real world. The world in the sun-dazzling cup opened a new picture for him. In this plane called the real world of time, the world was divided into countless real existences, which were separated from each other but closely connected. In terms of spatial structure, all the fragments in the plane were eternally separated. But in terms of time, every 2 fragments were closely connected with each other by an infinitely small time difference. For example, Chen Guang randomly chose a civilized planet in this universe and found a house on it. And this house had countless copies in the vertical direction of time. Then, he threw the water cup on the table and the house to the ground. As the water cup kept falling to the ground, it was like holding a camera with infinite frames and shooting at the water cup. Every frame in the camera was a complete space. At the same time, as the cup approached the ground, everything in the universe, from the big stars to the small particles, was undergoing a natural evolution. This was the real space that was divided into infinite time sections, and Chen Guang's task was to travel between any two sections that might be separated by 100 years or only a moment. According to the requirements of the world in the cup, he could precisely control some details or change history. In the real world of time, he faced an unprecedented super-philosophical test. In the process of constantly traveling, he magnified the time paradox and the butterfly effect to the extreme. Sometimes he traveled back to 10 years ago and slapped a little kid's butt, telling him that he couldn't cut down this apple tree, or he would be beaten by his father. Then the little kid really didn't cut down the tree. Then, in the process of this time section's derivation, the country called the United States, because the original great people did not grow up, delayed at least 50 years before it became independent. At the same time, because the establishment of this hegemonic country was delayed for 50 years, it led to another civilization on this planet that was good at creation to avoid many years of suffering, allowing this planet civilization to enter the technological level of space travel 100 years before another civilization of the same level. This further led to another interstellar civilization that should have been promoted from level 1 to level 2 was destroyed by this civilization. This planet civilization that should have been annihilated in the long river of history, because of this fast step, took the lead step by step and finally became one of the hegemonic civilizations in the entire universe. At the moment when Chen Guang slapped the little kid's butt, all the time sections that followed along this timeline were completely fragmented, but in an instant, a new timeline section was formed. Chen Guang could even write a long magnum opus based on this, on how a little but affects the operation of the universe. But this was only one of the countless things he did in real time. He kept traveling back and forth, constantly operating according to the requirements of the Holy Grail in each section. Sometimes nothing would change, but sometimes the history of the entire universe would be rewritten. In this process of constantly destroying and tampering with history, Chen Guang's understanding of real existence and the nature of time became more and more profound. He realized that the plane always had an extremely powerful self-healing ability. No matter how he manipulated the time sections, even if the worldview behind these sections was completely overturned, or even if he forcefully left behind the seeds of internal energy to change this universe from a technological universe to a cultivation universe, this universe would still be able to self-perfect and repair itself. The universe would always be able to justify itself. When he finally left the real world of time, his previous worries were gone. It doesn't matter how long I leave, as long as I'm capable enough, I can completely go back to the designated time when I travel back to Earth. For example, go back to the day when my secondary consciousness received its graduation certificate. Why not before I received my graduation certificate? What a joke. The owner of the Holy Grail, the overlord of the universe, the supreme of the heavenly realm, the most invincible demon king in Jianghu, still had to go to the graduation examination? Can I just skip that part? The biggest gain that the world and the cup brought him was actually not the ability to travel back and forth in time, but the confidence of having no worries. Now, he had completely broken away from the category of ordinary people, and was even several levels higher than the realm of the Golden Immortals or the supreme of demon martial arts written in Xinxia novels or Xuanhua novels. Before he solved all his worries, opened the whole heavenly Holy Grail, and completed the so-called mission left behind by his previous life, it was impossible for him to return to Earth and live the life of an ordinary person. But he did not want to wait until after he finished all the loose ends, only to find that thousands of years had passed, and everyone he knew had become a cup of soil by the time he returned. If that was the case, even if he became the master of all worlds, even if he could control heaven and earth, even if he could create things out of thin air, so what? If he lost everything that he was familiar with, no matter how much he gained in other things, wouldn't it be the same as having nothing? Even if he had all the planes, if he didn't have what he truly cared about, wouldn't it be the same as an illusion? Even if he became a god, Chen Guang did not intend to change his view of the world. He did not want to care about what kind of power his previous life had in the endless heavenly realm, and he did not want to care about the friends or enemies of his previous life. Until now, he had not recovered even the slightest memory of his so-called previous life, and even if he recovered it, he did not intend to accept it. In his eyes, he was a brand new, fresh life and did not need to live for others. Even if some things were fated in his previous life, when he was born, in essence, he was still a person born on a blue planet called Earth among the countless stars in the universe. Perhaps Ruri was the only exception. She must have had a close relationship with his previous life, but it did not matter. Previous life was previous life, and I was me. I want to take care of Ruri's feelings. I want to release her from the Holy Grail and fulfill her long-cherished wish. This is because I owe her a blessing in this life. Precisely because Ruri's appearance changed my life, it is only right for me to fulfill her wish. Chen Guang did not care at all about what promises and agreements he made with Ruri in his previous life. Actually, at this moment, he still did not know that the reason why the origin of the endless heavenly realm could still sleep peacefully and did not notice him, an anomaly, nor did it notice that the true crisis of the heavenly realm was about to get out of hand, was because the memories of gods in Chen Guang's body could never be awakened. Because his previous life had indeed died. That was not his real previous life. It was nothing more than a thought left in the universe of Earth. And in the end, after tens of billions of years, it controlled the invisible network bit by bit over this long period of time, allowing the Earth to give birth to Chen Guang. It was like an MMORPG player suddenly dying, but before he died, he pressed the auto find the way button. Even if the player died immediately, his character would still follow the auto find the way to the quest location. At this moment, after seeing through the real time, Chen Guang entered the next world within a cup after a short rest. The fifth world, one of the 9 great special worlds, suddenly appeared in front of him. It was the opposite of the real world, called the illusory world. From the very beginning, his memory had been tampered with, and he became a youth living in the world of Do Qi. His name was Xiaoyan. Chapter 13:13. Xiao Yin was the most neglected genius in the entire clan. He was the shame of the clan. Then he obtained a ring. In the ring lived an old lady named Lu Li. With the help of old lady Lu Li, he rose from trash to Do Huang, Do Di, Do Sheng, and Do Shun. In the end, he stood at the peak of the world. He made all those who looked down on him regret it. His power overturned the world, and he looked down on the common people. He had accomplished all of his dreams, obtained all of the respect and status he wanted, and even possessed unprecedented strength. But after a certain point in time, he suddenly lost his goal. He didn't know what to do next. It was as if he fell into an eternal loneliness. No matter how strong his power was, it couldn't bring him the slightest sense of fulfillment. There was nothing in this world that was worth pursuing. Xiaoyan didn't know what happened to him. He couldn't control his emotions. He was completely shrouded and dominated by endless emptiness and confusion. As if affected by his mood, even the operation of the entire world gradually slowed down. Finally, one day, Xiaoyan was completely defeated by this eternal emptiness. He suddenly woke up. He wasn't Xiaoyan at all. He was Chen Guang. This entire world of Do Qi was an illusion. He had only walked through a part of someone else's life in this illusory world. However, this illusion seemed too real. It made him sink into it for tens of thousands of years. He went through the entire journey from trash to supreme. He only woke up from the torment of emptiness after he completed all the dreams that might or might not be important. Since it was all an illusion, then let it be destroyed. It was nothing more than a story written by someone else. Chen Guang waved his hand and cut through space. His body moved, and in a flash, he left this world of Do Qi. But in the next moment, he turned into a child and fell to the ground. He lost all consciousness and memories once again. He only vaguely heard a sentence. This child, let's call him Zhang Xiaofan. Countless years passed. He once again stood at the peak of the world. Once again, he was in an eternal emptiness. Once again, he woke up from a nightmare. Just like that, Chun Guang was immersed in one illusory world after another, immersed in a different kind of life. Sometimes he was an office worker who suddenly got a golden finger. Sometimes he was a middle school student who had a blood feud and relied on his martial arts skills to survive. Sometimes he was a magic apprentice who was judged to have no talent at all, but possessed great creativity. Sometimes he became a human soldier in an interstellar war and was abandoned on an abandoned planet. Then, he relied on self-learning to repair, self-learning knowledge, and by picking up scraps to build his own battle mecha. In the end, he shone in the interstellar war and became a general. The number of lives he had experienced numbered in the tens of millions, and it was impossible to count them all. The genres had also jumped from urban to fantasy, to xinxia, and then to sci-fi. But no matter what kind of life it was, the final result was the same. He would always passively see through the facade of falsehood in the endless emptiness and regain consciousness. But no matter what kind of life it was, he could never escape the frame of jumping from one world to another. He was like a fish with only 7 seconds of memory, forcefully swapped out one fish tank after another. One moment, he was a roaring shark in the sea, and the next moment, he was a gentle and elegant goldfish with big eyes for people to admire. If the length of each life was stretched out, then the short period of time he was awake in the emptiness might not even be 7 seconds. After waking up for another short period of time, Chun Guang finally controlled the urge to tear space and leave this place. Instead, he thought about the current situation in his mind. If he did not think of a way, he was afraid that even if he broke out of this world, what awaited him would still be endless illusions. This illusion was too terrifying and too real. He could not see through it using normal methods, and could only sink into it. If one person was lying, it might be seen through. But if the number of people lying increased from 1 to 10, then the probability of the lie being seen through would decrease. If thousands of people were telling the same lie, then the lie would become the truth in a sense. But now, Chun Guang was facing the whole world. This world might even include many layers of planes. For example, in the world of immortal cultivation, it might be divided into the human world, the earth immortal world, the true immortal world, and the heaven immortal world. But no matter which world he was in, no matter how complicated the world he faced, every time he reached the peak, he would suddenly realize that all of this was an illusion. The whole world was changing ways to deceive him. He could only let himself reach the peak of this world first in order to see through the truth and falsehood. If he did not think of a way, he was afraid that he would be deceived in this way forever. There was not much time left for him to think. After a while, he was forcibly pulled into the next illusion. Another hundreds of thousands of years of fake life passed, and Chun Guang gained a few more minutes to think. His current situation reminded him of a movie he had seen before called Inception. This situation was very similar, and even scarier than Inception. In the end, the layers of dreams were just fragments. No matter how real the dream seemed, in the end, he was still himself in the dream. And the dream would have edges, and the structure of the world would definitely have loopholes. The illusion he faced was different. This was a perfect world, flawless. But he could learn from the method of the male protagonist in Inception to break the dream and find a coordinate for himself. Unlike Inception, every time he entered the illusion, Chun Guang's physical body would be replaced, and he would obtain a new identity. And it would be different every time. But he knew that at least one thing would not change, and that was his soul. Otherwise, he would not be able to wake up every time. So unlike the people in Inception, who could choose physical objects as coordinates, Chun Guang's coordinates continued to be placed in his own soul. He needed to find an obsession, the kind that would never be given up and forgotten. When he understood this principle, at least hundreds of illusions had passed because every time he came out of the illusion, he only had a few minutes to think. Then, in order to carve the coordinates in his own soul, he used hundreds of millions of illusions. Finally, he put down an extremely strong idea in the depths of his soul. This was the result of his careful consideration. He tried countless possibilities and even set up the possibility of finding out the real body of his previous life. But he failed every time. The relatively good ones could last about 3 or 4 illusions before being completely forgotten, but it was not enough to wake him up. The relatively bad ones were completely eliminated the moment they entered the illusion and merged with a new identity. The idea of finding out the real body of his previous life lasted the longest. He endured a total of 18 illusions, but it was still useless. This meant that this was not what he wanted to know the most in his heart. It was a little embarrassing for him to say the coordinates that he finally succeeded in. He really wanted to lift Liuli's 2 legs up, then disperse the fog that was used to cover her body, so that he could open his eyes wide and look at her carefully. Cough, cough. Anyway, thanks to Liuli, he succeeded. In this life, he reincarnated as the son of a rich family and obtained the legendary Super Prodigal system. He spent as much money as he wanted every day. Basically, it was to spend money to accumulate experience, complete missions, and then level up the system to show off and slap people in the face. He was reborn in a group of beautiful women, but the moment he opened his eyes from his hangover, he felt that these so-called beautiful women around him were extremely ugly. His mind was completely filled with the image of Lioli, especially when he thought of the scene in the coordinate setting. His whole body quivered crazily, and then he directly got out of this illusion. As he woke up, the entire world in a cup collapsed, and countless fake worlds that were constructed in his illusions were annihilated at the same time, turning into nothingness. Chen Guang was covered in cold sweat. It was indeed a space that was completely evolved from the special world in a cup. This was too scary. However, he did not come out empty-handed. First, he understood the truth, and now he saw through nothingness. His divinity suddenly rose, and even the efficiency of collecting the origin energy that escaped after the death of the Protoss had increased. Next, there were still 21 worlds in the 5th heaven of the sun cup waiting for him. However, through the exploration of the previous 6, Chen Guang had already found the sequence of the 5th heaven of the sun cup, and they were all related to the special world in a cup. It might have evolved from a single one, or it might have evolved from the fusion of 2. The real purpose of the 5th heaven of the sun cup was to let his vision go beyond the realm of humans, and to better understand the characteristics of the gods. Then, the remaining 4 special worlds that had yet to reveal their true faces would definitely appear one after another. Chapter 13-14. The newly formed illusory world looked like an irregular fog. It wasn't a complete sphere or an olive, but it was crooked. The fog was hazy and obscure, and it was constantly changing its shape at every moment. Chen Guang knew the general situation inside. Unlike the other realms, which had a complete world and shape, the illusory world was a mass of chaos. Only when he entered, the illusory world would change the corresponding worldview according to his situation at that time. If he randomly grabbed someone from the outside and threw them in, the effect would be roughly the same. If he threw 10 or hundreds of millions of people in, the illusory world could also change into hundreds of millions of fake worlds at the same time. This was not difficult at all for a special world that was illusory. Constructing an illusory world didn't require any energy at all. An entire Xinxiao world with 7 or 8 levels of stairs wouldn't consume the energy of a hydrogen atom in the real world. When the fog of the illusory world returned to its place, and together with the other 4 special worlds in a cup, Chen Guang turned his attention back to the next world in a cup. What happened next confirmed his guess. Whether he was willing or not, or whether he wanted to rest or not, Chen Guang had no choice. He could only crazily put all his energy into what was in front of him. That was, under the coercion of the heavenly Holy Grail, he rushed through one world in a cup. Next, in the illusory world formed by the fusion of the illusory world and the life world, Chen Guang learned the illusory ear, which was the opposite of the true eye. As the saying goes, seeing is believing, and hearing is false. On one hand, he used the eyes that could see through the truth, and on the other hand, He used the ears that could listen to the voice of fate to explore all the possibilities that didn't happen. In the illusory world formed by the time realm and the illusory world, Chen Guang also mastered the ability to fabricate time. The so-called fabricating time was essentially creating history out of thin air that didn't originally happen. This was reflected every time the heavenly Holy Grail created the world in the cup. Complete worlds like the transient sea and the true martial domain were born the moment Chen Guang entered. However, these worlds had their own history and were flawless. Billions of years of different histories created different cultures, yet they could guide the entire world toward the future that would definitely become real. Chen Guang encountered the sun-dazzling sky, which was derived from the sixth special world within a cup. In this world, he gained a deeper understanding of the true meaning of life. This special world in a cup was called the world of life. Previously, when he had a new understanding of genes, Chen Guang had thought that he had already seen through the profoundness of life. But when he really went to the derivative plane of the living realm, Chen Guang knew his insignificance and ignorance. He remembered a famous saying he had once heard: "The more you know, the more ignorant you feel." At this time, he was probably the person with the deepest understanding of life in the entire human history. No, in the long history since the birth of the first life in the entire Earth universe. But he was still lost in the mysterious picture scroll that the world of life opened for him. Genes indeed represented all the information of a creature. Whether it was a human with a physical body, or a mammal, or even a jellyfish, or even a fungus, or a virus, they all had their own unique full set of genes. Or some life on an alien planet that didn't have a physical body and existed entirely in an energy state also had their own genetic code. However, whether it was a tiny virus or a star-swallowing beast whose body size was comparable to the solar system, they all had another part of the genetic composition that couldn't be summarized and described: the soul. A tiny soul had a tiny lowly soul, and a huge soul had a huge noble soul. But whether it was a tiny soul or a huge soul, it was still a soul. The soul and the body complemented each other, and neither could be dispensed with, but it was like another kind of existence. Even if it was a spiritual life, no matter how close its spiritual form was to the soul, its body was still a body, and the soul was still a soul. The true core composition of the soul could be said to be the thinking, and it could also be said to be a life that belonged to another level in this body. In the true martial realm and the sea of time, the importance of the soul was explained to the extreme. The physical body died, but the soul didn't perish and could always be resurrected. In the Earth universe, the human body would grow old, get sick, and die, but the thinking was endless. A lonely person who lost both his legs and couldn't go out could still let his thinking run wild in his soul and even build such a wonderful world in his mind. In the Earth universe, the body was limited and technology was also limited, but the power of the soul was limitless. Take the speed of light, for example. Under the rules of the universe, it was impossible to break through the speed of light, but what if a person imagined something in his mind that could surpass the speed of light? Then, what if the world imagined in this person's mind actually existed? This kind of world was different from the bottom world hidden in molecules, atoms, or microscopic particles. It was an existence of another concept. The true meaning that Chen Guang comprehended in the world of life lied in this. The genetic code was the appearance of life, and the soul was the inner part of life. The so-called true meaning of life lied in the immortality of the soul. When the soul was obliterated, this life was truly dead. Then, after a person died, or after a god died, where did the soul go? He could still capture the divine thoughts that the god race had split off, but where did the souls that had disappeared for eternity after they had died? Was the soul really fragmented and even disappeared? Or, in fact, death only represented the beginning of another level of life? The human beings of the Earth universe and the god race couldn't be resurrected like the people in the sea of time or the true martial realm. Then, where did these souls go in the end? Or did it really disappear completely? Of course, Chen Guang was now qualified to interrogate this kind of question, because now he could clearly stand outside the Earth universe, see all the changes in this universe with the perspective of God, and even interfere to a certain extent. But he still couldn't find the whereabouts of the soul. Even if he put his spirit in the hospital and stared at an old man who was about to reach the end of his life, he still couldn't capture the whereabouts of the old man's soul when the old man closed his eyes and his heart stopped. With this complex and profound thinking, Chen Guang, who came out of the derivative world of the world of life, immediately threw himself into the next world in a cup. First understand what life is, then understand what death is. What he saw was a lifeless world in a cup. There was no sound here, and time and space seemed to not exist. Chen Guang was like a lonely wild ghost floating in this world in a cup. Since he came in, he couldn't get any hint. He didn't know what he should do, and he didn't know how to meet the assessment standard of the world in a cup. He seemed to have become a forgotten toy in a black box. He had just seen the wonders of life, but in a blink of an eye, he was thrown into an endless dark cage. This situation was more uncomfortable than the illusory space. No matter how illusory the world was, at least there was a real life. He could see all kinds of different people, and he could learn all kinds of incredible abilities in the fictional life. Although these abilities eventually became a bubble, at least it could kill time, right? Just like many people who are addicted to games, unless they become professional players. In the end, it is just a waste of time, but wasting time itself is also a kind of enjoyment. But Chen Guang was now locked up, and it was the kind of completely locked up. When others were locked up, at least there was a bed and a quilt. When there was nothing to do, it was also a kind of pastime to rub the quilt, but no one to talk to would make him feel lonely. But now he was floating here. There was no light, no people, no land. Everything was empty and silent. In the beginning, he could still feel his body, and he could pinch his fingers to feel his existence. But as he was locked up longer and longer, his five senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, which he hadn't felt for a long time, completely deteriorated. Not only could he not feel the existence of external objects, but he couldn't even confirm his own existence. Chen Guang fell into a deep sleep, and he slowly lost all consciousness. This time, he sank deeper and longer than when he died under the palm of the Master God of Chaos. When he finally returned to his senses and opened his eyes, he'd once again appeared in the void within the cup. He felt a wave of lingering fear as he gazed at the completely pitch black, thin, and completely flat death realm that was like a cicada's wing. He was really dead just now. His soul didn't collapse, and his body still existed, but it fell into absolute stillness in the endless aura of death. When he couldn't feel the existence of his own soul, then for him, who could create a world with a single thought, it was no different from real death. To put it simply, when an ordinary person thought they were dead, they might not really be dead. But when Chen Guang thought he was dead, he was really dead. And the true meaning of the realm in the Sun Cup, which was derived from the realm of death, was to let him die once. But in the end, Chen Guang met the requirements of the realm of death, completed the task, and came back to life. He had to enjoy real death to meet the requirements of the realm in the cup. But after completing the task, he could be released alive. This was like the philosophical question of which came first, the chicken or the egg. It was a paradox and infinitely subjective. But what he got was the feeling of being infinitely close to death. Chen Guang looked at the realm of life next to the realm of death, which was full of vitality. These two were placed side by side in the 9-star formation, and each occupied a different position with the other 5 special realms in the cup. In the center of the 2 realms of life and death, streams of flowing shadows were colliding with each other. After understanding life and death, seeing through reality and illusion, and mastering the true meaning of fate, he could finally see some things that he couldn't see before. In the void in the cup, on each plain ball that represented a special realm in the cup, there were silk lines that led to other realms in the cup. There were more than 2,100 inner realms of the first layer of the Heavenly Spirit Seeing Cup, more than 700 inner realms of the second layer of the One-Line Heavenly Cup, and more than 10 inner realms of the sixth layer of the Brilliant Sun Heavenly Cup, including the 2 inner realms of the eighth layer of the Immortal God Heavenly Cup. Lines extended from each inner realm of the cup and linked to the 7 inner realms that had already revealed their forms, forming a tree-shaped, incomplete net. The incomplete part was, of course, the positions of the 6th, 7th, and 8th plane balls that were not yet formed. They were still empty. In addition, there were some lines that were connected to the low-level realm in the cup, but the other end was empty and swaying. It should be because the remaining 2 special realms in the cup had not yet appeared. But in Chun Guang's mind, he could already sketch out the final complete shape, which was exactly the same as the 9-layer giant tree in the world of creation. Chapter 13:15. On Earth, another 50 years had passed. There were more and more players, from the initial 10 million to 30 million, and now there were signs of breaking through to 100 million. Some of the first batch of low-end players who had not broken through the E-level boundary had already experienced normal life and death like ordinary people. After all, not everyone was gifted. After the game system relaxed the selection criteria, there were gradually some ordinary people who became players. In addition, some people were already in their 50s or 60s when they awakened. Their luck in the game was also very poor. They were always at the tail end of every mission, and they didn't pick up any amazing items. They didn't join any powerful organizations, so naturally, they didn't get a longer life. With a large population base, there were naturally all kinds of people. Some people became dragons as soon as they entered the game, and some people were stuck in the gaps between their teeth. They could not do anything smoothly. After decades, they had experienced hundreds of World and Cups. Although they were lucky to escape every time, they could not even save the most basic 20 reward points. Or, even if they did save, they often used it to buy life-saving items. Of course, there were people who did worse. Many people barely managed to mix in a few low-level games, and then suddenly died tragically, losing all their abilities. What was worse was that they had just been selected as players. They had not had time to show any of their ambitions. They had just learned from others and had just risen to the sky. As a result, they got off to a bad start. They just entered the game for the first time and encountered an impossible task, or encountered the ruthless Protoss. Of course, after experiencing the first expansion and the global awakening, these people would not lose their memories even if their identity as players was taken away. But the more they retained this memory, the more they would envy the identity of other players as awakened ones. They would be even more envious of other people's strange abilities. Even if it was just a useless ability to bend a spoon, it was still an ability, wasn't it? Moreover, if the spoon was made to be extremely large, the ability to bend the spoon itself would turn waste into treasure. It could play a miraculous role in manufacturing. But they had already died in the game and could only return to the life of ordinary people from then on. But they were not completely hopeless. Everyone knew that the game system would reselect players every once in a while, and the total number of players would skyrocket. Previously, when a number of players increased from 10 million to 30 million, there were many players who had been reset and restored their identity. Later, when a number of players increased from 30 million to 60 million, some people got another chance. Later, when a number of players increased to 100 million, it was said that there were even lucky people who had failed the first 3 times, but this time, they made a comeback. Of course, they died every time and did not survive more than 3 episodes. It was hard to tell whether this kind of person was lucky or not. All in all, as the first batch of old players passed away normally, it took 60 to 70 years for mankind to finally step into a new era from the primitive and solidified civilization. Now, after the revolution in energy technology, the speed of human space travel had reached a speed of thousands of kilometers per second. Of course, in order to maintain such a speed in the universe, and at the same time to guard against the possible appearance of interstellar floating islands or rock flows, the spacecraft detection system, cruise system, power system, and the materials of the spacecraft itself had to reach a whole new level of technology. After all, when the speed reached 3,000 kilometers per second, even if it was just a pebble the size of an eyeball hitting the hull of a spaceship, the instantaneous impact might be unimaginable. But no matter what, no matter how difficult it was, after decades of technological explosion, humans had finally achieved it. Now, the first batch of warriors who had set out decades ago had yet to reach their destination, but the second and third batches of warriors had already embarked on their journey. One day in the future, they might even be able to catch up to their predecessors in the vast universe. Humans were never a civilization that was content with the status quo. It wasn't that this race was good at invasion, but that development required more resources. When the level of science and technology reached a certain level, the resources on Earth had been developed to the point where they could not be further developed. The focus of the era shifted from further development of energy to carefully protecting this home, fearing that they would accidentally do something that would cause the deterioration of the natural environment to become irreparable. Humans would eventually have to leave this planet and step into space. Just like the tribes of ancient times, even if the land at the foot of the mountain was enough to provide food for all the people in the tribe, the leader of the tribe would always want to get better clothes and live in a better house. The pioneers of the tribe would also always want to see what the scenery on the other side of the mountain was like. There might be green grass, clear streams, or divine trees that would drip sweet and nutritious juices when the bark was cut open. Curiosity drove humans to progress, and it drove humans to take steps into the unknown. In the structure of the multi-level civilizations in the entire universe, Earth had just crossed the threshold of a level 1 civilization. Compared to other interstellar civilizations, was it not still a primitive era? What was on the other side of the mountain? What would they get from there? This simple question ran through the millions of years of history since the birth of humans. It was just that the distance of the mountain had become a few dozen, a few 100,000, or even millions of light years. Looking at spaceships leaving the solar system at a speed of 1% or a few percent of the speed of light, heading toward planets that were suspected to be habitable for humans several light years or even dozens of light years away, Chen Guang's emotions were a little complicated. Apart from his immediate family, most of the people he really cared about had received a lot of real benefits from being a player. Even the weakest individuals, such as Guoming, who had been promoted to the director of the operations department of the Morning Light Group, were already senior C-level players. These senior players still had a long lifespan. Even if the top S-level players were 100 years old, they would still look like young people in their 20s or 30s. However, looking at the two tombstones that had been erected side by side, Chen Guang still felt bad. In the end, his parents did not make it back. He was not a good son. Therefore, no matter how far human technology had advanced in the past 60 or 70 years, when he could go back, Chen Guang would turn the clock back. He would let everything go back to the day when he left the university. By doing so, he would appear to be quite selfish. He would erase the decades of effort of the entire civilization. The spaceships that had already traveled half the distance would return to Earth in the time reversal, and those sophisticated instruments would become mineral deposits deep in the ground again. Of course, he was being selfish by doing so. However, Chen Guang did not intend to ask for the consent of others. He had also been selfless for too long. He could not really consider everything for others. Moreover, turning the clock back would not only happen on Earth, but the entire universe. In a sense, the civilization on Earth might not be affected. The future that had never really come was gone. Who would know? Who did he owe this time? Who would lose anything? Perhaps after I, Chen Guang, went back, human technology would advance faster? After all, I am so strong now. Even if I just left a little bit of the photocatalyst technology, did it not evolve into the towering tree of the Morning Light Group with a market value of trillions? Withdrawing his gaze from a certain cemetery in the 5 capitals, Chen Guang took a deep breath and once again threw himself into the next world in a cup. The last 2 special worlds in a cup finally appeared in front of him. His understanding of God had finally reached a truly perfect state. One was the end world, also known as the realm of chaos. This world represented the end of all things. The other was the beginning world, representing the starting point of all things, combining chaos and time. Chen Guang saw the end of time in this mixed world in a cup. By combining primal chaos and space, Chen Guang saw the limits of space and planes. By combining primal chaos and fate, Chen Guang saw the limits of fate. Combining the starting point and fate, he saw the source of everything. It turned out that there were a total of 8 main gods in the endless world of gods. Among them, the strongest was the main god of chaos, which represented the end. The other 7 corresponded to fate, reality, illusion, life, death, time, and space. If it wasn't for the last one missing, the sequence of the main gods would basically be the same as Chen Guang's 9 special worlds. The only one missing was the primordial main god, who represented the starting point. Of course, there was, but this original god was the origin will of the endless world of gods. First, there was the origin will, then the world of gods, and finally the entire endless world of gods, as well as the countless lower worlds below this level. The main god of chaos, the unnecessary endpoint, was fabricated by the origin will, a fake endpoint. In the void in the cup, the 9 planes representing the special worlds have been completed, and the threads derived from each small world were quickly connecting. The image of the 9-layered giant tree became clearer and clearer, and in the world of creation at the top, some changes were happening. Chapter 13:16. There were more and more avatars of the Protoss on the giant tree, and their facial features were becoming clearer and clearer, making the giant tree look like a huge photo wall. Fortunately, the Protoss had no need for social interaction, otherwise they would be fascinated by this photo wall full of Weibo avatars. Maybe they would even write all kinds of social updates under each avatar. For example, today a stunning woman was born in the plane under our banner. She is born to be compatible with the rules of absolute beauty. She can help those below the divine Lord to comprehend and cultivate. The highest bidder will get it. Today, I have finally deciphered the Shadow Godstone obtained from the Dark Forest 30 million years ago. It was left by the Shadow God Emperor 800 billion years ago. It contains half of the rules of Shadow. If you want to buy it, hurry up. That old evil-eye revered Lord disturbed the peace of my maid. He deserves death. I have beheaded him and announced it here. If the gods also had a circle of friends, it would probably be like this. In the void of the cup, Chen Guang briefly returned his mind to the world of creation. He found that this world, which was at the top of all the worlds in the cup, did not seem to have a peak of evolution at all. Previously, when this plane reached infinity, Chen Guang thought that this was already the limit of this world, but now it seemed that his understanding of the word infinity was not deep enough and not thorough enough. While constantly absorbing the mysterious energy intercepted from the Protoss, all the planes representing the worlds in the cup were constantly instilling the power of their rules into the 9 special worlds, which were eventually sent into the world of creation in different categories. This heavenly holy grail seemed to be plundering the power of all the planes to support the world of creation. The scope of these powers was extremely wide, from the composition of all the planes to the physical strength of the living beings living in these spaces, even including the energy contained in all the mineral deposits, and even all the energy contained in the thoughts and imaginations of the intelligent beings in various spaces. They were all nutrients for the world of creation. Chen Guang seemed to be able to see his future. Now, he missed the days when Liuli could tell him to look out for yourself, and things will work out when the time comes. Although she always appeared to be very incompetent and couldn't answer any questions she was asked, she was still able to understand. Her ignorance was unbefitting of her status as the divine emperor. But now, Chen Guang knew that she wasn't really that weak. It was just that she wanted to cooperate with him. In order to prevent the God world's origin will from prying into her consciousness, she had taken the initiative to sever all of her memories. She wasn't pretending not to know. She really didn't know. As for now, even if she still didn't know or understand anything, Chen Guang really wanted to share it with her. Look, I'm already so awesome now. Why don't you praise me? Unfortunately, Chen Guang couldn't find her now, and he didn't know what kind of conditions he had to fulfill in order for her to appear again. Collecting his thoughts, Chen Guang turned his attention back to the test of the world and the cup. He had originally thought that there were still many missions and a long journey ahead of him. But now, he suddenly discovered that there were only 3 cup realms left for him to complete in the 7th layer of dust. Furthermore, every Dust Heaven Cup realm didn't simply correspond to the laws of the God realm, nor did it correspond to the 9 special planes. Instead, it corresponded to another universe. When he entered the first Dust Heaven Cup realm, he even had the illusion that he had returned to Earth. What appeared in front of him was a large plane that was exactly the same as Earth's universe. If it weren't for the strong sense of unfamiliarity with the people around him, Chen Guang really would have thought that he had gone back and that time had been reset. Here, he experienced another kind of life. This seemed to be a life journey that should have happened to him, but it didn't really happen. In this Dust Heaven Cup realm, called the World of Rebirth, he returned to his junior high school years, back to 8 years before he got the Heavenly Holy Grail. Although he knew that all of this was a test of the world and the cup, he couldn't help but experience the life of a reborn person here. He was like the protagonist of a reborn novel, using his advantage of knowing the changes of the times to change the fate of himself and his parents from another perspective. Moreover, in the year he was admitted to university, he successfully made himself the richest man in Sichuan province, with power over the country and assets of tens of billions. In these 4 years, he bought and sold stocks, speculated in futures, invested in internet companies, operated games, and even made Chen's hot pot expand from a small county to the whole country. Then, when he was in his 3rd year of university, the impact of an internal force martial artist on his family didn't appear, and his mother didn't suffer from serious illness. Then, the Heavenly Holy Grail didn't appear on that day as it did in real life. Even though he borrowed Zhu Jifa's Rena car, he didn't even change the license plate number. On that day, he still disguised himself and drove the car to the place where he was supposed to meet the mysterious person who threw the cup. Everything that was supposed to happen didn't happen. Chen Guang didn't get the Heavenly Holy Grail. Later, when he returned to school, Wenwen dropped out of school and disappeared from his life. He also didn't manage to save Jin Shuriwei and Jiang Yage at the painting lake in Wujing. The death of the 2 national goddesses caused a huge earthquake in the domestic entertainment industry. Chen Guang actually felt very wronged. That day, he clearly went to the painting lake early in the morning, and he even planned to become an investor of rivers and mountains in advance, planning to prevent the tragedy from happening that day. But he stayed there for a whole day, and Big Beard didn't bring the crew. Then, he decided the shooting plan of the crew as an investor, only to find out that the shooting at the painting lake had been changed to a week later. Just as he left with peace of mind, Big Beard suddenly came up with the idea to go there at night, and then something big happened. After that, nothing happened between him and Teacher Zhua. Teacher Zhua didn't even stay in school, but went abroad in advance. Sun Xiaoxuan also didn't reveal his feelings to him. Without these circumstances, Chen Guang, Wu Tong, and Tang Ying naturally didn't have the opportunity to get to know each other. Unknowingly, 60 years passed. When the white-haired Chen Guang was alone for the rest of his life, and the wealth of the richest man in the world was nearing the end of his life, he suddenly realized that in this Dust Heaven Cup, he was a completely ordinary person who had walked through a life that should have belonged to him. In this life, there was no lapis lazuli, no holy grail, and many things that should have happened didn't happen. Then, he entered the 2nd Dust Heaven Cup, where he became a game player who had been raised since he was young. In this game, he commanded one war after another in the virtual space, bringing his own weak race to the top in the game. When he finally eliminated the last enemy, he was suddenly told that the game he experienced was actually a real war in the endless realm of the gods. The radiant god race he led was a race that really existed in the endless realm of the gods. As for himself, the moment he won the war, he was infused with unparalleled power, becoming the radiant god emperor who was below only 8 people and above the billions of gods in the god realm. This seemed to be another part of his life. After entering the last Dust Heaven Cup, he really returned to the Earth universe. This cup was embedded in the Earth universe, and his return was in the year 5050. What awaited him was the last battle of the human race on Earth, whether it was the game system or the universe war. Chapter 1317. Civilization was an inconceivable existence. No matter what happened, as long as the entire social structure was not destroyed in one go, this huge existence would always be able to repair itself. It could even turn everything, good or bad, left behind by the impact into a part of itself, as if nothing had ever happened. In the past 3,000 years, humans on Earth had experienced too many changes. In the last 3,000 years on Earth, most of the time, humans have been in a feudalistic era with low productivity and slow progress. However, in these 3,000 years, humans seem to have turned on a cheat, going through the Third Industrial Revolution, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and even the Fifth, Sixth, and Seventh Industrial Revolution. In the first 1,000 years, humans' technological level went from the nanometer level to the millimeter level, and then to the picometer level. They could directly operate on the atomic level and even move protons. To achieve such a high degree of precision, they no longer needed simple material science technology. More importantly, they needed to be able to control the force field. Using the electromagnetic force field to replace the original industrial synthesis machinery, they could achieve a precision of 10 to the minus 12 power, which was on the picometer level. Since then, it meant that humans had completely walked the path of electrochemistry. Turning stone into gold had also entered the realm of reality. Rare metals and other elements could even be directly synthesized using carbon and silicon atoms that could be found anywhere in the universe. In addition, humans' aerospace technology had also reached a new level with the control of the energy system and electromagnetic force. Although the speed of light was still insurmountable, and the fascinating space warp and space-time flight were still science fiction stories, there was a revolutionary change in the medium that provided propulsion for spaceflight. In the past, spaceships relied on their own fuel injection to form a reverse thrust force when they were launched on Earth. After leaving Earth, they could only rely on the initial speed to fly in the universe. However, when a new spaceship took off, it no longer relied on combustion. Instead, it relied on the anti-gravity system to rise vertically. When it was within the range of a solar system, it relied on remote control of gravity to move forward. For example, when leaving Earth, the gravitational engine was first aimed at Pluto. In a universe where there was no air resistance, it continuously increased the gravitational pull of the Earth and the Sun naturally. The spaceship would continue to accelerate. Relying on this gravitational system, the spaceship could easily accelerate to more than 7,000 kilometers per second in the solar system. When the spacecraft left the farthest planet around the solar system, the spacecraft directly activated the interstellar navigation system. It sounded complicated, but it was actually very simple. The interstellar traction system could attract the cosmic dust in front of the spaceship and eject it through the thrusters at the rear of the spaceship. Regardless of whether it was the traction in front or the ejection at the back, it could provide the spacecraft with continuous forward flight propulsion, allowing the spacecraft to reach a speed of more than 10,000 kilometers per second. Although space seemed to be a vacuum, it was not actually a void. There were usually large amounts of dust and even isotope particles floating in the vacuum. Protons, neutrons, and electrons could be extracted from these isotope particles to provide energy. Nuclear fusion had already broken away from the control of low-level nuclei, such as hydrogen and deuterium. Instead, it directly jumped to the more subtle nuclear level, and the precision of the operation was directly implemented at the proton level. With the support of such a level of technology, human spaceships could practically move forever in the universe, unless they crashed into the true nothingness. But even so, relying on the propulsion medium and energy stored in the spaceship. The spaceship could cross a distance of more than 3 solar systems. The detection equipment that monitored the background of cosmic radiation could also guide people in advance to avoid the pure void. Unless they were unlucky enough to crash into a gravitational vortex or a cosmic storm, general space travel was very safe. Of course, the cracking of gravitational vortexes or cosmic storms was still beyond the level of human technology. This was not surprising. In the past, humans did not even understand the cause of lightning. During the sailing era, they were also helpless against the buoyancy vortex in Bermuda. With this level of technological advancement, humans had traveled to more than 3,000 galaxies near the solar system in the first millennium, developed more than 1,000 colonized planets, and conquered 3 primary civilizations that were either in the feudal era or in the primitive society. The total population of Earth civilization had also reached the level of trillions. In the second millennium, the technological level of humans on Earth had directly reached the level of Fermi. For example, from 3000 to 4000 AD, humans could even carve on protons. In addition, through a deep understanding of the power of the universe and in-depth exploration of black holes, humans could finally locate through cosmic radiation. After sacrificing hundreds of thousands of pioneers, humans successfully solved the mystery of black holes. After more than 200 years of research, using the analysis of black holes as a foundation, humans could finally temporarily create a weakened version of artificial black holes through the control of force fields, which was a wormhole. In the beginning, the duration of artificial black holes from birth to destruction did not exceed 1/10,000th of a second. Moreover, the aperture was extremely small, and it was difficult to locate the direction of the exit. However, after 100 years of exploration, the diameter of the wormhole had been enlarged to hundreds of kilometers, and the duration had also reached 1/100th of a second. The direction of the exit could also be controlled within a certain range. Since then, humans had successfully mastered the technology of space travel, entered the next era, and became a true Level 2 civilization. After that, when humans truly swept through the Milky Way, they broke into the territory of another mature Level 2 civilization. It was the Level 2 civilization that had known of the existence of humans a long time ago. The sudden intrusion of Earth civilization was beyond the expectations of this Level 2 civilization. They did not expect that in just over 1,000 years, this low-level civilization, which was extremely primitive in their eyes, had developed to this stage. The last time their intelligence personnel arrived on Earth was in 1786. They planned to send out their intelligence personnel again in 3786. There were still 179 years before they would send their intelligence personnel to Earth again. After all, the distance was very far. Even a Level 2 civilization would have to pay a huge price for such a long voyage. They did not think that a civilization that still used sailboats to sail on the sea would develop to a level that even they had to look at directly in just 2,000 years. The sudden appearance of Earth's humans caught them off guard. No one had expected that Earth's civilization would experience one technological explosion after another in such a short period of time. After a short test between the two sides, a war inevitably broke out. The veteran Level 2 civilizations were ahead of humans in all aspects of basic science. In the early stages of the war, humans were repeatedly defeated, and even their mother planet, Earth, was almost conquered. In order to preserve the continuation of the race's tinder, Earth civilization even sent a total of more than 3 billion escape teams from various colonized planets. This was called the Tinder Project. 4 years after the Tinder Project was implemented, a scientist on the Tinder spaceship 79 finally developed a new combat mode that combined the Awaken's abilities with wormhole technology. Using the so-called mysterious energy in the Awaken's bodies, they could suppress the rules of the universe to a certain extent and create individual combat mechs that could travel short distances through wormholes. Following that, the Tinder spaceship 79 carried the hope of humanity's counterattack and killed its way back to the humans' last stronghold. In the next 100 years, Earth's civilization first used the interstellar mesh to stabilize their stronghold. At the same time, they further developed wormhole technology and crazily improved their weapons. In the end, they turned defeat into victory and completely conquered the veteran Level 2 civilizations. It took them 300 years to finally digest the technological achievements of the veteran Level 2 civilizations in the year 400 AD. At the same time, another symbolic event happened. The last non-player, a baby, awakened as a player less than 3 days after it was born. Since then, Earth civilization had a population of 10 trillion people and 10 trillion players. Human evolution once again entered a new chapter. Intelligence, physical strength, lifespan, and other characteristics were developed to the next stage. During the period from 400 AD to 500 AD, wormhole technology was developed to the extreme, including folding wormholes, morphing wormholes, space-tearing devices, and other technologies from scratch. The precision of human control had even reached the level of 10 to the minus 18th power, which was an Amigo level. Through equipment, humans could even directly capture heat to synthesize quarks, electrons, and even protons and neutrons. Being able to convert energy into matter meant that humans had entered the next stage. If Earth civilization was given enough time, with the creativity and productivity that humans were currently displaying, Earth civilization could completely conquer the Milky Way. However, in the year 4987 AD, just as humans had completely mastered antimatter technology, a Level 3 spiritual civilization that had ruled the Milky Way for more than 500 million years suddenly descended. A terrifying spiritual attack swept across the Orion Arm, Perseus Arm, and Sagittarius Arm with an irresistible force. These were the 3 Milky Way cantilever arms that had the footprints of Earth civilization. This Level 3 spiritual civilization clearly wanted to strangle the potential threat in the cradle in an instant. When low-level civilizations were not enough to pose a threat to them, the spiritual civilization was willing to observe the other party's progress as an observer. Through the analysis of low-level civilizations, the spiritual civilization could gain a lot of insights. After possessing absolute calmness and a sufficiently long lifespan, the best way to increase their knowledge was to observe the lives of others. Of course, if the conditions allowed, the spiritual civilization also wanted to leave the Milky Way and go to the nearby Andromeda Galaxy or other galaxies in the local galaxy cluster. However, the Andromeda Galaxy was too far away from the Milky Way. It was 5 million light-years away. The spiritual civilization could only drift at a speed of 3,000 kilometers per second, which was 1% of the speed of light. If they wanted to drift to the Andromeda Galaxy, they would need at least 250 million years. However, the oldest existence in this civilization was less than 5 million years old. They really did not have the courage to take such a step into the void. As for the other galaxy clusters in the even larger Virgo supercluster, it was even more impossible for them to explore it. The fear of the void was ingrained in the genes of the spiritual civilization. The existence of the spiritual civilization had brought them a long lifespan and extremely high intelligence, but it also made their bodies unable to ride spaceships like Earth civilization, which was faster. In addition, although they had mastered wormhole technology, they could not let their bodies pass through the wormhole. They would be completely torn apart. Of course, the way they transmitted information and thought was also derived from their natural instincts that they had evolved. Even if 2 individuals were on opposite sides of the Milky Way and were separated by 100,000 light-years, they could communicate at any time like Earthlings chatting on QQ. Therefore, when they decided to launch an extermination operation against Earth civilization, this spiritual civilization mobilized more than 100,000 individuals. They first quietly came to the vicinity of a planet inhabited by humans or a space station and suddenly launched an attack, exactly like what they had done many times in the past. The Earth civilization had been born for less than 2 million years, and it had only been less than 20,000 years since it had truly become a civilization. It was not even as long as the individual lifespan of a level 3 spiritual civilization. To the spiritual civilization, wiping out a civilization with such a short lifespan was about as easy as picking off a rice grain-sized scar on a person's body. However, this spiritual civilization failed. Their mental attacks did not cause the slightest bit of harm to the humans on Earth. The reason was simple. The humans on Earth, who were all gamers, had a mental defense system that they could not understand at all. The depth of information in this defense system even exceeded the understanding of a level 3 civilization. It was higher than dark matter, higher than the basic forces of the universe, and even higher than the level of the existence of the universe itself. As soon as the mental attacks came into contact with this defense system, they were automatically counterattacked by the defense system. Then, these spiritual civilization individuals, whose bodies were at least 100 times the size of the sun, suffered a devastating impact. The bodies of the level 3 civilization individuals that did not have physical bodies completely collapsed in an instant, turning into dark matter and heat that drifted in the universe. Their memories were even devoured by the player's Esper abilities. This was not the end. The game system counterattacked for the awakened Esper abilities of the humans. After killing 100,000 spiritual civilization individuals, it continued to sweep through the natural mental link between the individuals of this civilization. Like a virus, it wiped out the ordinary members of the level 3 civilization, ranging from monarchs to kingdoms, in an extremely short period of time. The humans on Earth regained their clarity after a short period of confusion. Many memories that they did not have before appeared in their minds. All the knowledge that the spiritual civilization had accumulated for more than 800 million years had been completely accepted by the Earth civilization just like that. The advancement of Earth civilization from level 2.5 to level 3 was supposed to be a very long process. However, it had been skipped by someone in the form of a huge gift. The knowledge provided by level 3 civilizations not only included their own research on the spiritual level, but also all the scientific and technological achievements of thousands of level 2 civilizations in the entire Milky Way galaxy over a total of 800 million years. The spiritual civilization lasted 800 million years from its birth to its destruction, ruling the Milky Way galaxy for 500 million years. However, be it the first 300 million years or the next 500 million years, this spiritual civilization never stopped plundering and spying on the knowledge of low-level civilizations. The Great Level 3 civilization had only made one mistake, which was to treat the awakening of the players on Earth as an ordinary evolution of the universe and not pay much attention to it. Of course, when they wanted to take this seriously, they immediately launched a thunderous attack. However, they never expected that they would be killed by the recoil. They did not even manage to kill a single Earthling. However, if they had done this in the early days, the humans of Earth would definitely have experienced pain. All non-player ordinary people would have died, but those who survived would have been able to obtain the knowledge of the level 3 spiritual civilization much earlier. As for which result was better, there was no answer. In short, everything they had accumulated benefited the humans of Earth. In the next 50 years or so, the Earth civilization digested the knowledge system of the entire Milky Way galaxy while fighting and contending with the Protoss in the game system. In the year 5041, humans were defeated by the Protoss in the Sea of Time, which had become even larger. The core of the dimension, which was hidden at the bottom of the Sea of Time, was obtained by the Protoss. In the year 5045, billions of human players benefited from the assistance of 2 indigenous, martial emperors in the realm of True Force. They defeated the Protoss and obtained the true inheritance of the martial saint of True Force. They also controlled the highest peak of the mountain spirit. In the year 5050, humans and the Protoss finally entered the last game space. It was an unprecedentedly high-level and complex world. This place was called the World of Creation. At the same time, the super civilization that ruled the Virgo galaxy, one of the true overlords of the Earth universe, arrived in the Milky Way. This was because the experimental sample that this super civilization had released 63 years ago had been erased. The experimental sample of the super civilization was the level 3 spiritual civilization that had once ruled the Milky Way. At this time, Chen Guang had returned. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.